It's been such a long time since Boston led the way. It's more than a feeling. It's Mike and Tom to start the day. The heart of Massachusetts should be freedom, justice, and liberty. Freedom-led pilgrims to Plymouth Bay. Salem trials had justice too late. The sons of liberty spilled the tea, and then the redcoats spilled their blood. The shot heard around the world rang out from the Bay State. Boston's strong and ready to defend. It's where revolution started and ends. It's been such a long time since Boston led the way. It's more than a feeling. It's Mike and Tom to start the day. Quincy Market, Freedom Trail, Charles River, Boston Harbor, Bunker Hill, Griffin Wharf, Fenway Park, North Charge. It's been such a long time since Boston led the way. It's more than a feeling. It's Mike and Tom to start the day.
Hey, everybody. So, listen, I started the stream a little quick. I figured I'd try and get some open the phone lines and see if you guys want to call in and chit chat. Come on. Okay. Put the number in the chat. Hey, Sam. Hey, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. That's the number. We're planning on broadcasting the Canton audit results. I can't believe that is just, I'm in awe. And especially with what's coming out lately, kind of makes you really, now, man, vote Susan Harrington. God, please help, guys. You got to help that town so much. Sarah, I'm feeling better. Thank you very much. Robin, after you left, it wasn't good. Did you? Yeah. They left. We had breakfast. Yep. Yeah. Do what you can, right? Yeah, did you guys see that article? Let me see if I can pull that up. That was pretty cool. Where is it? Where did I send that? Let me think. Here we go. No, this isn't updated. Come on. Yeah, so we also filed a lawsuit in regards to the buffer zone. I don't think it's fair to you guys. I mean, it's not like we're asking to go in the courtroom. It's not like we're asking to mess up anything. I mean, what does I'm not a big dude with 30 pounds of equipment and producers and whatnot. I'm one guy with a camera. Hey, Mary, turn your sound off on the background. There we go. I'm going to present you. Here we go.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
How are you today? Wonderful. What's going on? Oh, thank you.
It is unbelievable. And Karen Reed did not hit anybody. And I am so pissed off. I can't believe how pissed off I am. But I'm going to tell you something. Do you know why the Channel 5 is so against everything with Karen Reed? Do you remember when Alan Jackson defended Spacey there in Nantucket there? Do
Okay.
you remember that?
I don't, but go ahead.
Well, he was the defense lawyer, and what it was, the boy or the young guy, that was the one that was the one the what do you call it, the plaintiff. His mother worked for Channel 5, so they don't like anybody from Alan.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Yes, and I remember that so well because I watched that trial on TV too. And I don't think Kevin Spacey should have got away with it. But Alan Jackson did a wonderful job. He's a great lawyer.
He's a dynamite lawyer.
I'd love him.
Yeah.
But I'm disgusted with what they're doing to Karen. I really am. My blood is boiling over this.
As it should be. I mean,
Yes.
she woke up today with a murder charge over her head, like she did yesterday, like she's going to do tomorrow. And it's
Right.
unnecessary. This is all just completely and unnecessary. It's unnecessary. I mean, if it was an accident,
But it wasn't.
but
We know that.
I'm not talking about anything to do with Karen. If in what happened elsewhere was an accident, we don't know. He didn't. We don't know. Did they roofie her, Karen? She's got medical issues. They put something in her drink. She passes out.
I know.
What happens? They come back, grab them, right? Who knows? I'll walk home. They come and jump to. No one knows that nothing happened, right?
Right.
That's
You know, I go to Canton for my doctor. I have a doctor in Canton, and I kind of like hint around asking about things, you know. Some of them don't want to talk anymore, and I can understand why, because, you know, that police people are probably listening to everybody in the town.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter because what they're accusing her of doing just physics, like physics. Two things can't occupy the same space. Physics,
Right.
Physics cannot happen. What they're accusing her of doing, it doesn't. Even the time doesn't work.
No, and nothing works. But, you know, when I first heard it, I remember that winter. I remember watching TV, and they said that there was a police officer dead on somebody's lawn. And then when they said it was a cop's lawn, I said, oh, right away, I knew there was something wrong. And I knew right away she didn't do it. It's just, you know, when cops have a party, things happen.
You know, I don't think John planned on what happened was going to happen. I don't think he
No,
planned
he
that,
didn't
you know.
plan on it. Somebody else planned on it. It's a cover-up.
At this point, we need to prove Karen didn't do it, which is kind of like fourth grade stuff here, right?
Yeah.
Fourth grade level here. And still, we're still here. And how much is it costing? What's the total cost? Oh, for protecting what? What are they protecting?
They're protecting that kid to begin with. They're protecting him, and they're protecting the ex-cop and the other cop.
So
they're protecting them.
But in the long run, are they really? I mean,
well, I think not Taunton, but Norfolk is run by the mafia to begin with. I really do think that. That's my opinion, and you know, I can go with my opinion.
I can understand why you would think that. I can see that, but I can't see reasons why it wouldn't be. That's my problem. I see more reasons as to why things like that is true.
Yes. But you know what? You just see it, you feel it. But I just wish we could. I don't know. That Canoni, she drives me friggin' nuts. That one. I'd like to put something down her throat. I'll
Well,
tell you.
no. Maybe some orange.
Aggravates
Maybe we'll
the
let it
hell out of
orange
everybody.
juice, something like that. Coffee,
Well, I don't mean
tea.
that I would actually, but I mean to
No.
shut her up and become a real judge.
She,
I don't know.
you know, and the thing is she in other trials she's acted kind of different, right?
Yes.
Here it just seems so one-sided. It just I don't
This is,
whether we don't understand the law or whether she's walking a balance that we've never seen over the edge. I don't know. I don't know enough about it to know whether she's doing it right or wrong. But I tell you one thing, whatever she's doing it just so that she won't get in trouble. She's going to the edge where she won't get in trouble and she won't let anyone go past it. So,
right.
and that's unfortunately what happens. It's more about protecting themselves than about Karen's secondary, and it should never be that way. You know,
I know.
I thought Lady Liberty was blind holding the scale of justice, right? That's what
Yes.
I thought. It's definitely not that in this case.
And that Brennan guy, huh? Mafia
Well,
all the way.
listen, you gotta, you gotta admire the amount of work in the different angles he's trying to work at removing any piece of evidence that he can that hurts him. Pretty much, which is all of the evidence, which is why it's kind of funny, right? He's
Yeah.
trying to remove all these things that can prove Karen factually innocent, and he's trying to remove all of them. And
I watched the first trial, and I saw those crash daddies, and they were right. They said he never got hit by a car or anything like that.
No, he didn't.
He was beat up.
I've seen a lot of fights, and I've seen people look like that after fights, unfortunately.
Right.
So,
but expect him to die either in the snow.
Don't know. Unfortunately, that's no. We can only deal with what we got in front of us, and that's Karen, right?
Right.
So
well, we're all
any
Karen.
hope for John has got to go through Karen, unfortunately.
I live in Taunton, but I go around shopping around in Taunton, and that's all I talk about, this Karen Reed trial. And I talk to people, strangers. I don't care who they are. I talk to them.
Put a pink,
because I want them to know she's innocent.
Pink ribbon out front on a tree somewhere for Karen.
I will. I got 3 trees, so I'm going to put three.
There you go.
My trees.
Awesome, and send it to CPUTOM. I'm making a collage of them.
I will.
People that are sending them in, thank you. I got all of them. I got a couple on Twitter. Those are great. Thank you.
Yeah.
So all over the place. You guys are just you also got to put down where it's from, so I know.
I will.
So, all right, thank you so much for calling in.
Oh, you're welcome.
And have a good weekend. It's supposed to be like this all weekend, so
I know.
Do your best with it, and don't get too riled up with this meeting going on.
All right. Yes, I know. I'm looking forward to hearing that. I know that's a fast too.
Awesome. It's going to be Canton. Going to be kind of curious.
Yes.
All righty.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That was cool, huh? You guys are awesome. I love everybody. You guys just, yeah. So we're gonna get the trying to find. I should have been looking for it. I got it here. Yeah. The nurses, Brigham Williams, talking about the 17 nurses that have brain cancer. The number has increased. 25 people all have the same type of brain tumor. 25. So something ain't right because they develop at a certain rate, I thought. And for all of these nurses to develop it within a certain time frame, all of them, I don't think you can do that. 25. How many people worked on the I'm trying to find out the answers to these. How many people worked on that ward total, right? If only 30 people worked on that ward, then is it that? Is it this? Is it yeah. Right. All they have up now is a QR code. Meeting isn't going yet. Live. Let me share it. Oh, I hear stuff in the back. And hear it. It's definitely live. Definitely. I can hear it right now. It's coming in. Hold on, real quick. Hey, Tracy, we get like 2 minutes, okay? All right, hold on. Tracy, hello.
Hey, Thomas.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. How's your day going?
I love you.
Oh my goodness. Thank you very much. Thank you for watching.
It's so funny because I just met you at the Taunton Green the other day, but I had met you before at the Star Drive-In. But at any rate, whatever. I'm originally from Quincy, okay? And I was just listening to Mary, and I'm like, who is this lady? She is just spot on. It was Heather Unruh who worked for Channel 5, and her son accused Spacey of like groping him like a few years prior to when it actually went to court.
Wow.
But anyway, it was really all a bunch of bullshit.
And she's still carrying a grudge to this over an innocent girl.
Right. And once you say something and you have a forum like that, well, you kind of got to follow through with it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Excuse me. But in the end, her son just basically looked like a buffoon. And I'm not saying that Kevin Spacey wasn't a little.
Well, no, I mean, yeah,
you know?
I mean that's
because
the whole
I think
thing, right?
Yeah, but that's beside the point. Did you see Turtle Boy last night in the speaking of like trolls and all these conspiracies? Not conspiracies, but more nonsense that's coming out with Higgins pulling Chloe off John and etc. Did you see on Turtle Boy last night? I guess it was on X. I'm not on X, Twitter, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Barry Lewis.
Yes.
Did you see it?
Yes.
Oh, you did.
Barry Lewis has been right more times than he's been right. I don't think he's been wrong. Just like Aiden, they both have a pretty good record about being dead on with what they come out with.
Yeah, but what Barry Lewis is saying, even Turtle Boy was like, dude, you're so full of shit.
Listen, maybe maybe there's something within that is viable, right? Maybe
in all that every
it's a lot. There's so much, right? It really it's so much to I don't it makes me even say more. I don't know because I wasn't there, but I know Karen didn't do it. That car didn't hit John. There's no way.
Right. John O'Keefe was not hit by a car, and the car did not hit John O'Keefe. Like, plain and simple, bottom line, you can't get better than ACA.
No.
I don't know. I've
Where would
seen
you go?
corruption.
Like,
I don't know. It just gets worse by the day. It literally is more jaw-dropping by the day. I don't know. I'm sad. It just seems so unfathomable
You know how
to
bad
me,
it is?
and it's happening.
Charging somebody with a murder she didn't commit. That's how bad it is.
And you know what? Like, this shit rolls downhill.
Yep.
Okay, Maury Haley is shit.
Well,
She's no good.
she hasn't said much about this, has she? Where is she?
She's no goddamn good.
Where is she?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, Mara.
She has Morrissey and the state trooper in her back, and the state troopers in her back pocket. Shame on her. What is happening to Karen Reed? It's going to go down in history. This is unprecedented.
Hey, you ready for this? This is gonna hurt. If the 25 nurses have cancer, how many babies?
I know.
How many babies have cancer now?
I know a girl that works at
No, how
I know
many?
a girl who works at labor and delivery at Brigham Williams.
I'm sure the
She's worked there for a long
babies are born
time.
probably healthy, but if they're saying that 25 nurses all worked at the same place, all had the same type of brain tumors, you know what? How many
is this
babies that were
possible?
born there had that? How do they know it's not that? It wasn't a one-time deal. They all got poisoned by something. How do we know that? AC
I
line
don't know.
break and you get knocked with Freon. Who knows, right?
That in itself is just
Yeah.
again something that you literally have no words for. Like, there's no words.
And I
How
noticed.
does that happen?
I know, and here's your thing, right? I noticed within the nursing, there's like CNAs and there's LPNs, and there's
Yeah.
RNs, then
Yeah.
there's the doctors, but the doctors don't do much anything. The nurses, the RNs do pretty much everything.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
and there's a hierarchy there, legit. Like you can't step on the head nurse's toes. Like it ain't happening.
Right.
Like she runs that because she's responsible for it.
Oh, I work in hospitals,
You
and
know
I'm getting
it.
ready to
So
go work at St. Luke
you
now.
go do your boss's work for her today, and you gonna think she's gonna do it right? It's just no, doesn't happen that way. Nursing
I don't know.
is the only consistent, solid thing there ever will be in the world. I'm convinced.
Absolutely, 1,000%.
The only thing that's gonna be consistent ever is a nurse.
No hospital would function without nurses.
No.
In any capacity.
No, society wouldn't.
No.
All right, listen.
In any capacity.
Thank you so much.
All right, dude.
Over the Canton.
All right.
Thank you, sweetheart.
Come to New Bedford Tuesday night. Again, please. I missed it.
Tuesday night. Maybe.
All right.
Not that far away.
All right. All right, dude.
Talk to you later.
Have a good day.
Thanks for calling in. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Sweet. That's nice, huh? Sweet. You guys are the freaking... Yeah, you guys are awesome. All right. We have the first slide up. Let's present the screen. Then I'm going to dip out and let you guys go at it. This is the Canton Audit. Good luck with this, guys. This is going to be, not good. Let me get rid of that call-in thing. Thank you. This is going to be interesting. Please, guys, get a second. Get a piece of paper and a pen, right? A cup of coffee, glass of wine. It's 2:00, right? There ain't nothing happening. It's raining out. Don't think you're going out.
Good evening, everybody. If we could settle down, please.
What happened? I'm going to go away.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'm Bob McCarthy, Chairman of the Police Audit Committee, and I'd like to welcome everybody to the Police Audit Committee-sponsored public forum. I'd like to introduce Attorney Carmen Reese, who will be serving as our moderator. Attorney Reese is a 9-year serving moderator for the town of Concord, a former 2-term Select Board member and a former ZBA member. She recently stepped down as president of the Mass Moderators Association and has co-authored the latest and most recent update to Town Meeting Times, the Municipal Town Meeting Bible. She's been an attorney with large corporations, handled dispute resolution, environmental law, and class action lawsuits. I couldn't be more pleased to have the honor to introduce Carmen Reese, our moderator, to our forum today. Carmen?
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy, for that wonderful introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd ask everybody to please take a seat if you haven't done so already and silence your electronic devices. And before we proceed any further, we'll hear briefly from Chief Wendell Robery with some public safety information for today's meeting. Chief?
Thank you, Carmen. I'd just like to go over the fire exits in the event we have to evacuate the building. Down here to my left is an exit. Over stage right is an exit, and out the back and to the right is your quickest ways out. Also, any medical emergencies, we have plenty of medical personnel on scene. Just give us a shout. We'll be there to help you. And then I would like to ask we keep the back area, that's the section behind the last row of seats, available for public safety and media. So anybody else, if you could just grab a seat. And finally, at the conclusion of the meeting, I just ask that everybody exits through the main entrance, the entrance that you came in. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. In keeping with the Canton tradition at its town meetings, I'd ask you all to please stand and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. So this public meeting is the culmination of a process begun by a vote of Canton Special Town Meeting on Article 6 on November 20th in 2023. That vote authorized and requested Canton's Chief Procurement Officer or his designee to convene a police audit committee and to proceed with an administrative policy, procedures, and compliance review of the police department to be conducted by an independent consulting firm, together with an appropriation of $200,000 to cover the cost of the audit. That vote further provided that in accordance with the Public Records Law, the results of the independent consultant's report shall be made public upon completion. Through a competitive bidding process, the very well-qualified firm of Five Stones Intelligence was selected by the audit committee to conduct the audit. The full audit report was made public by posting on the town's website on April 1st. The report took 4 months to complete and weighs in at 200 pages. We're here today to hear directly from Five Stones Intelligence about the findings and recommendations of the audit and to provide citizens an opportunity to ask questions about those findings and recommendations and the methodology of the audit. And that's our complete agenda for today. A few words about how we will be running today's meeting. And you will find everything that I'm about to say on the handout that was in the lobby, the community meeting sheet and the procedures for Q&A. Today's meeting will conclude no later than 5 p.m. and will begin with a presentation by Five Stones Intelligence, which should take us to just before 3:30. And we'll hold questions until the conclusion of that presentation. The rest of the meeting will be dedicated to questions and answers with Five Stones Intelligence. The limited time for questions is reserved for individual members of the public, and priority will be given to Canton residents since they are the ones who voted to initiate the audit and funded it with their tax dollars. Members of the media will have an opportunity to ask questions at the press conference that will happen in the cafeteria immediately after the meeting. All those who wish to ask a question should come to one of the 3 microphones. You'll see there's one in each of these center aisles and one over here to my left, your right. The 2 microphones in the center are reserved for residents of Canton, and the microphone that is over here to my left and your right is available to any individual. Speakers may speak only after I've recognized them, and I'll recognize you by the number of the microphone that you're standing at. You'll see the numbers hanging on the stands there. When you are recognized, please state your name and your town and proceed with your question, and you'll have 2 minutes. And the time limit is intended to permit as many people as possible to have an opportunity to speak and ask questions. There's lights here on the podium in front of me, and they will show green when you begin, at the beginning of your 2 minutes, and it will turn yellow when you have 30 seconds left, and it will turn red when it's time for you to stop speaking. If your question doesn't pertain to the process findings or recommendations made in the audit report, that's not part of our agenda, and your question will be ruled out of order. We may or may not have time to have every question answered today, and if you have a question that's not answered before the meeting concludes, you may submit your question online through the Town of Canton website. And for those questions about the report that are submitted by 5 p.m. on April 7th, best efforts will be made to post Five Stones Intelligence answers on the town website within a reasonable time. And now I'd like to introduce the members of the Five Stones Intelligence team. We have Matt Germanowski, want to wave, and Brian McKnight. Where are you, Brian? You're down there, okay. I'm going to ask them, before they begin their presentation, to just tell you a little bit about Five Stones' experience and their own individual backgrounds in law enforcement before they begin the presentation. Gentlemen?
Good afternoon, everybody. Five Stones Intelligence is a investigative and intelligence firm that has also been involved in law enforcement audits nationwide. The team is comprised of primarily retired federal agents, either from the FBI, like Bailey Tinsley here. Myself, I spent almost 27 years with DEA. Matt Germanowski spent 30 years with the Federal Drug Enforcement. The cadre of employees have vast experience in investigative and intelligence services. We have government contracts that we're involved in as well, and we serve private clients, including law firms nationwide. That's pretty much it. If you have, I guess we'll talk later when we have the Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, the floor is yours for your presentation.
Thank you very much. As you heard, my name is Matt Germanowski. So I'm going to walk you through this presentation. I'll also be here with Brian and Bailey to answer all of your questions. We're going to cover the entire scope of work. And I don't know if everyone is knowledgeable and or realizes what it is we were asked to do. So we're going to try and make sure we walk you through that. All the information we got was provided by the Canton Police Department, District Attorney's Office, concerned citizens and town officials. I know there are people in this room that have emailed us directly. We actually tried to take time and respond to any email that we received that provided us additional information or asked us to look into certain events, even if those events were not included in the scope. We reviewed everything on site and or ahead of time. The Canton Police Department provided all of their policies, rules, and regulations to us electronically, so we could start much of the review prior to our arrival. Myself, Brian, and Bailey have been on site probably just under 2 months when you take the time We were up here for weeks, sometimes 10 days, sometimes 2 weeks at a time, working within the Canton Police Department and the town. We reviewed all previous town meetings. We watched the audit committee. We watched some of the select board committee meetings. We did everything we could to understand what it is your concerns were and how we could best approach this audit to give you the most detailed result that we could. One of the things that's important to understand, and if you went back and watched the interview of Five Stones, myself and Brian, we were there was very specific language presented to us from the police audit committee, and there was a very clear distinction made between an investigation and an audit. So an audit is an assessment of your department, and that's what we did. We came into your department, we looked at their policies, their rules, their regulations, their code of conduct. We assessed their compliance to the accreditation standards in the state of Massachusetts. Then we took those same policies and procedures, and then we looked at their implication through the course of the CPD's normal operations. One of the things that we want you to understand is the scope of work was delineated by the procurement committee. We agree with it, but I think there's also a public perception that we walked in and looked at whatever we wanted to look at. There were 20 sections. Each section had multiple questions contained within it, and they were selected by the town. We were presented with that scope of work, and if you look at the scope of work, which I believe is available online, there's 8 detailed pages that gave us specific directions on what it is they wanted us to assess. So there should be an understanding of how we went into this. So what was included, as I just said, is an assessment of the written policy against the accrediting authorities in Massachusetts. Our job was to come here and look for deviations of policy. And again, I would refer you back to the interview that we participated in November. When there is a deviation between policy and application, the thing that you as a town or a resident of the town should want to know is why. All right, and there are many factors that can explain notice I didn't say justify, but there are many factors that go into whether a policy is followed or not followed or deviated from, and we address those as we move through. One of the things we did not do, and I think there's been some concerns, we weren't here to reinvestigate any crime. We're not here to collect new evidence. We have no law enforcement authority. We don't have subpoena authority. I can't compel someone to speak to me. So of the maybe 60 interviews we conducted with members of the department, your town select board members, school superintendents, chiefs from neighboring towns, district attorneys, assistant district attorneys, they're voluntary. Nobody was forced to talk to us. With that said, nobody refused to talk to us either. So we got complete cooperation from everybody in the town, from all of your elected officials, from all the members of the Canton Police Department, the prosecuting offices, as well as the neighboring towns. Everybody was more than willing to sit down with us. I also want to say this on the front end. We were not interfered with, influenced, manipulated, contacted, or pressured by any member of the police department, by any member of the select board committee, by any member of the police procurement audit committee. I've never been to Canton before we got here. Brian's from Providence, Rhode Island. We have no connection to your town. So as you move forward, just again, I'm going to refer you back to our interview because I stated it pretty clearly that day is, and I believe the words I used were, we can't sell you a report. What we can do is give you our services. I didn't know what the report was going to contain. I didn't know what the findings were going to be. But what we said that day and what I'm telling you today is what we did is we gave an honest, fair assessment right down the middle. When we found a deviation, we called it out. We documented it and we wrote it down. When your department did something good, we wrote it down. One of the things that is very important to understand, there's a lot of words on that screen. That's just one paragraph of 8 pages of what it is we were asked to do. But specifically, I hit the wrong button. Right here, paragraph 4 stated the community is interested in to understand what the department does well, and more importantly, what the department could improve upon. So we did an overall assessment of the department as outlined by your police audit procurement committee, and I believe as agreed upon through town votes. So what it is we're presenting to you is what it is you've asked us to assess, what it is you've asked us to address. And that is important too, because part of our job to answer to the citizens of the town is to understand what the environment is. So a lot of our time, hours and hours of our time, were spent watching some of these meetings, some of the town halls, some of the votes, to understand the concerns of the town and what it is that brought us here. Because it was your scope of work, it was your request for services that we replied to. So that's how we ended up here. And this is how we moved through this bit of information. The areas of review, these were our 19 to 20 sections. Each section contained multiple bullets underneath it that we addressed. It was in the report, somewhere on page 4 or 5, we stated the report was structured in the exact way the scope of work was structured. So rather than write a report where people had to cross-reference and say, well, did they answer this? Did they answer this? The sections as outlined in the report were the sections as outlined in the scope of work. So you could look at number 1C and go right over to the report 1C, and you could find your answer there. There's a question towards management and culture. We were asked to assess the morale and culture of the department. So clearly we're not in a vacuum. We turned this report over Tuesday. We've had significant contacts, myself, Brian, and Bailey. Why did you do this? And why was that? And who cares how the police feel? You asked for it. You asked for it as a town. You want to know what the assessment was. You want to know what the culture was. You want to know what the morale is. That's why it's in the report. Everything that's in the report, I'm going to say this again, is what was asked for by the town. And we gave an honest, fair assessment of all those facts. And of course, I'm sure a lot of you have questions. We welcome the questions, and we'll answer everything we can within the time. Some of these areas that you see highlighted, these were the areas of the audit where we found recommendations could be made, specifically within policy. Now, I'll start off by saying that all the written policy was in complete alignment with the accreditation authorities. We then cross-referenced it to multiple accreditation authorities to give you the biggest bang for your buck as we could. We went through crime scene protocols. The recommendations that were made in crime scene protocols relate to all crime scenes. So when we make a recommendation, we're not talking about specifically one case or another case or another case. It's a summary of what we've seen take place at multiple crime scenes. And we have reviewed crime scenes for the Canton PD that go back almost 10 years. However, we all know there's two very significant cases, and they just don't occur a lot here. So we didn't shy away from those things. We addressed those as well. As I told you earlier, this is our methodology. Everything we could review ahead of time, we did, whether it was a meeting or a policy, a regulation, a code, any kind of case file or electronic report that could be sent to us. We reviewed them prior to getting here to make our time here more efficient and more productive. We then took everything that we found, everything that we read, everything that we've learned, and applied it against what was done in the field. And that's really how any assessment should occur. You have to ask, what are they supposed to do? What occurred? What did they do? And if it doesn't line up with what was written and what was performed, then you have the question of why you have that deviation. That's what our report is. So we do not go through the details in our report of how we reviewed things and what we reviewed, because the meat of the report are the recommendations or those policies that we've identified that maybe there's some gaps between the written form and the application. So we started off with your written policies. We looked at 98 policies and applied them as they were written. These are some of the different accreditation facilities we weighed them against. What we want to know, or want you to know, is that your department was just certified 4 months before you hired us by the Massachusetts Police Accreditation and Compliance Act. So MPAC, they were certified before we got here. So that is your governing body that determines whether or not your department meets its requirements. MPAC certified your department in June of 2024. So we did not come behind them and then go back and measure their requirements. We are not in a position to measure whether or not the department's in compliance with MPAC if MPAC was just here and said they're in compliance. So what we did is we took the existing policies as they were written and we weighed them against CLIA, which is sort of considered the gold standard in law enforcement accreditation agencies. And we also measure them against, of course, general law, Massachusetts general law. That comes into play as we speak about crime scenes. But I want you to know that's how we did it. We used Mass General Law, post requirements for Massachusetts, and CLIA as our measuring sticks. So when you read the report, you don't see us referring to MPAC, again, because you just had MPAC come in and certify your department. 483 standards related to law enforcement. As they're written for the CPD, you're in complete compliance with every major accrediting department across the country. The CPD is not out of compliance with any written policy, any standard, or any requirement as it applies to their daily operations. What we did see, and some of the stuff we would recommend, were officers' personal use of cell phones. While it's not a violation and MPAC approves the use of personal cell phones, and the CPD policy, I believe, said in a last case resort, we recommend your department have department-issued phones. All you have to do is watch the current trial taking place to see what the pitfalls can be for an officer using his personal cell phone in the course of duty. So one of our recommendations is your officers have department-issued phones. Another recommendation would be that every officer certifies annually that they have read, understood, and will abide by these policies. That is just on top. That is not a requirement of any of the major agencies, but it is best practice that annually your officers certify, hey, I've read my policies, I know what the expectations are, I understand them, and they certify these policies annually. We came across some documentation practices for law enforcement purposes. When someone writes a report, that's like a formal form of notes. So we felt that some things could become standardized within the department, so there'll be some specific recommendations as it relates to documentation practices and also crime scene preservation. And we'll get into that as we move into section 2. But what you should know is that of the 483 policies, or 98 policies we read, and the 483 standards, Canton Police Department's in complete compliance with every major accreditation agency across the state. And oftentimes, they exceeded what was required, and I will speak to that as well. Civilian complaints, there was a big focus on that. Several sections of the scope of work requested information on civilian complaints, and it did that through multiple requests, whether it was professional standards, civilian complaints, citizen privacy, and accountability. We cover that in section 3, which we refer to as internal affairs. Cameras, we'll address this. CPD has body-worn cameras. They're in full compliance with that. The attitude of the officers have been outstanding. They've welcomed the cameras. They're happy they have them. It started off as a test phase at the end of last summer, but you should know everyone in your department wears them. They're reviewed daily by a lieutenant, all the activities recorded, and the activation of these cameras, again, the department's in full compliance. That's the certification I spoke to earlier by MPAC, which just happened in June of 2024, a few months before you hired us. So crime scene protocols. So I think this is the big concern for everybody. There were multiple crime scenes that we looked at. So when we make a recommendation, it's not related to one specific crime scene. It's in general in terms of practice. The bottom bullet is the one that people are either happy to hear or people have heartburn about. However, what we can tell you is that there was no evidence and no findings that we came across that would suggest any misconduct or criminal conspiracy or intentional acts by your police department to conceal, alter, change, manipulate, plant, or tamper with evidence. Absolutely none. We weighed all these applications. We looked at how these crime scenes were processed, how they were carried out. And yes, we had issues with some of the things as noted in the report, specifically photographing of crime scenes. It's been inconsistent in terms of when the photographs take place and the full documentation of the crime scene. There's a reason for that we'll explain on the next scene. Some of the witness interviews we feel should have been conducted back at the station as it relates to certain crime scenes and their investigation. But the big thing everybody has to understand is this, is there's a consensus in this town or a thought that the Canton Police Department is recused from these investigations. They are not. This isn't my opinion. This is Massachusetts state law. So there are 3 towns within the state of Massachusetts that conduct their own homicide investigations. And I think it's Boston PD, Worcester, and Springfield. I remember the first 2, but I'm not from here, so I don't remember the 3rd town. But what it says right here, and you can read it yourself, is that any unattended death, right, that is suspicious in nature is immediately given to the jurisdiction of that district attorney to be investigated by his designee. His designee is the Mass State Police. The very law after that says the district attorney or their representative shall direct and control the investigation and coordinate it with the department within the jurisdiction of the death. Canton PD is not recused from any case, nor are they conflicted out of any case. What we did see, though, is an attempt to be oh, my clicker's broken now. Uh-oh. All right, I got to get the IT guy because I don't know if the clicker's working right now. Lewis? Oh, there it goes. Oh, there we go. So what we do see, and these are our recommendations again, and these recommendations speak to all the crime scenes. I'm not talking about the tragic death of John O'Keefe. I'm not talking about strictly the tragic death of Miss Birchmore or Mr. Casey. We're talking about all the crime scenes that we've looked at for the past 10 years. These are what some of the improvements that we think could take place. The biggest thing, let's stop from the bottom and go up. The Canton PD is your police department, and they're a very good police department, and they're a very professional police department. They should stop recusing themselves because, quite frankly, it's not working. The efforts of the Canton PD to recuse themselves, to give the town a sense of there's no impropriety, have created gaps in the coordination of significant investigations. And if you go back and look at the current trial that's taking place, you can see what some of those gaps were. The CPD should not recuse itself from any case. It should have its own case file, and it should work in conjunction with the Mass State Police and every homicide or every unattended death that occurs within the city, the town limits. Better coordination with the state police, communication and collection methods, documentation, photographs, interviews, and crime scenes, the preservation. These are the areas of concern for us. And this sort of is a big circle because all these things interact with each other. So when we say crime scene preservation, and we got some of these questions the other night at the town audit committee, Well, it's like, well, isn't our police department trained? Yes, but you're trained for the specific things that you do every day. So right now, if you have a police officer that's promoted to detective, they come in and it's like, congratulations, you're a detective. You owe them that additional training if you want them to perform at the level that you're setting for them. And basic crime scene preservation, particularly if they stop the recusal, the self-recusals, again, that should stop. And if they're going to partake in this, have the ability to preserve that crime scene until the Mass State Police or Plymouth County get there. Why would I say that? Because the Mass State Police and Plymouth County process crime scenes every day. I believe prior to Miss Birchmore, you hadn't had a homicide occur in your town in 22 years. Was that right? 22 years. So it's hard to process a murder scene if you don't see them every day. And what we told the procurement committee the other night is Brian and Bailey and I, we worked in cities where you would have 3 homicides between the time we reported to work and lunch. Brian ran our Chicago office. And if you've ever read the news, they would have 70 homicides in a weekend. So you are good at what you do. And it's a great thing, if you think about it, that you don't have a police department that is super proficient and able to process murder scenes like it happens every day, because they don't. Now, obviously, we know just through recent events, they do occur. So you want your department to have the basic ability to seal off a scene, get a scribe, do some of the things that are necessary to preserve the evidence as it lies prior to the Mass State Police arriving, and then they work that case in conjunction with the Mass State Police. We talk about photographs. Some of the recommendations in the report, make sure there's a collection kit in every sergeant's vehicle. Every shift has a sergeant. That sergeant's on the road. Should one of these things happen, that sergeant can roll up and there's a kit available. January 29th, 2022, there weren't kits in every car. There weren't blood collection kits at the police department because the Canton Police Department doesn't collect blood. So these are some of the things that we noted. And I also want to let you know this too. As we did this audit, when we found something, we immediately formed the CPD command staff. And some people were very shocked to hear that we did that, but why would we look to you as the town that brought us here, find a mistake or an error or something that could be improved and not say something for 5 months? That doesn't make sense. So when we saw a deficiency, when we saw a gap, when we saw something that could be improved, we brought it to the attention of the command staff. Now, we have integrity, so it doesn't mean we didn't document it. It doesn't mean we don't say we didn't have a finding, but there are certain instances where we addressed things. We brought it to the command staff and said, look, this is not good. This isn't in line with best practices. This can be improved. And those changes were implemented right away. And changes were made. The department got better, but we still documented it. It's still in the report. So nothing was swept under the rug. We didn't look the other way. We addressed everything. And it goes to this bottom bullet about recusal and integrity. Recusing yourself from something is not integrity. So for those that think that it's an integrity-driven act to recuse yourself from something, integrity is when you have to look at somebody and say, hey, this is wrong. You made a mistake. I'm calling it out. We've got to fix it, and you address it. You work through it. We didn't shy away from bringing anything to the attention of the CPD command staff or the police procurement audit committee. But when we did, it was acted on immediately. We weren't influenced. They didn't sway our opinion. We never found something and had anybody from anywhere in town go, let me explain that away. No, you can't explain it away. This is our finding. This is what it is. This is how we suggest you fix it. And then the choice was don't fix it or fix it. So everything in the report is what we found. And again, we shared that information with the command staff because we wanted to start the benefit to your town and your department right away. When I say internal affairs, I'm speaking to the professional standards, civilian complaints, officer misconduct. That was highlighted in probably 3 or 4 different parts of the scope of work. So we summarize those, we call that internal affairs. Everything the CP does policy-wise, as it's written, again, is in complete alignment with post accreditation, with MPAC, as was certified in June of 2024. And then we took it above and beyond and compared it to the CLEAR requirements. And you're even in compliance with those accreditation agencies that don't oversee your department. Here's what we found: inconsistency in the way internal affair investigations were executed, the way they were documented, and the methods of investigation. These inconsistencies went back 4 different police chiefs. The greatest improvements to this process have happened or occurred or have been implemented in probably the past 18 months under your current command staff, under your current serving chief. However, there were still inconsistencies, there were still problems, and there was some stuff that we found. The biggest thing is lack of consistency opens the door for events like this. We're here because of a lack of consistency, not corruption, but these are the main issues as it relates to the internal affairs side. So the scope of work that we reviewed erroneously said there's only been 1 internal affairs investigation by the CPD in the past 25 years. That was not accurate. In fact, there have been 75 actions, disciplinary actions going back to 1991. As you can see, 63 of them received clearances, 12 were sustained and resulted in 4 suspensions, a demotion, 7 training and counseling sessions. The results of the IAs were both civilian complaints and initiated at the direction of command staff for either inappropriate behavior or unacceptable performance. So you do have a command staff now that holds its officers accountable. Post requirements, we got a lot of emails about things not being reported to post. We got a lot of emails about things being swept under the rug. We got a lot of emails about impropriety. So we go back and we look, and through our communication with Post actually emailed the CPD and said, you're over-reporting. The only requirement for Post is the reporting of significant acts of misconduct, which would be a violation of civil rights, any kind of criminal act, any excessive use of force. Your police department was reporting everything. And as you can see, February 23, the director of Post actually emailed your chief and said, stop, you've exceeded your requirement, and this isn't what Post is set up to monitor. So as far as the accountability goes for internal affairs, they're accountable, they're in line with policy, but their practices weren't consistent with best practice and standards as it relates to documentation and adjudication. So here's 2 cases that will illustrate my point to this. This is the first case. A detective from the CPD reported to work and tragically left his family pet in the car, and that pet passed away through the course of the day. So the outcome of that case was that officer was not disciplined. And I will stand here before you and I will field your questions. That was the right decision. And you would say, why is that the right decision? Well, one, because you have to understand there's a difference between discretion and corruption. The police department has discretion, and you have to think of the intent. And did this officer receive special treatment? I would argue no. And the reason is because I believe it was 8 months before this happened to the officer, the summer before, it happened to another civilian in town. They had their family pet go into a car prior to a fishing trip. Tragically, it died. They couldn't find the pet for 2 days. The police department responded. They understood it was an accident. They understood the traumatic effect it took on the family, and they made the correct decision not to charge that civilian. This event then happened to Detective Taylor. They followed that same process. They responded, they looked at the scene, they understand it was a traumatic event, they saw the toll it was taken on the family. They made the decision not to charge Detective Taylor for a crime. It happened after Detective Taylor. Another citizen in the town of Canton, going golfing, went to get something out of his wife's car. Their dog got in his wife's car, he closed the door and went golfing. At the end of the day, when he returned, the family pet was found dead. The police responded. They realized the circumstances. They realized it was an accident. They called animal control. They did not charge that civilian. It happened again with a town of Canton employee who continually left their pet, and I believe this was in the wintertime, in their car while they reported to work in the city county building. And you had multiple other employees in the building call and complain. That town employee received 5 warnings by the Canton Police Department before they were eventually summoned, issued a summons. So the action with Detective Taylor was consistent with the way they treated every other civilian in the town who committed the same act. Our problem with, or what we identified that could be better with Detective Taylor's incident, while it would have been uncomfortable that day, you have to bring Detective Taylor in and take a statement from him. And when you take that statement from Detective Taylor, he is not going to be happy. He's probably going to be mad at you. But then I'm going to take a statement from the other people in the department and say, hey, Detective Taylor said he got to work, and then he came in and worked with Bob and Joe. I got to take a statement from Bob and Joe, and I got to record that. At the end of the day, I'm going to come to the same conclusion. I'm not going to levy charges against the detective when I haven't levied them against other people in the town that have done the same thing. But what that internal affairs investigation is going to do is answer the questions of the public. When the public looks and says, did you sweep this under the rug? The answer to that is no, because we looked through this, we understand it, and we also understand and we applied what happened to Detective Taylor to what happened with other civilians. Now, at the conclusion of Detective Taylor, they did call animal control, and the main officer was away, and I believe her assistant showed up. With all the confusion going on and the effect that Detective Taylor felt, he was put on administrative leave, which is within the authority of the chief of police in any department for an officer that goes through anything traumatic. He was sent home on admin leave, maybe for 3 days, and then he took his sick leave. He did that because this was an unintentional act, and it devastated his family, and he's going to have to live with that. Again, processing of that, probably not done the right way. Before he leaves, you got to get a statement from Detective Taylor and from the other officers involved. What the officers need to understand is that you're not going to take that statement because you're trying to hurt them. You're trying to protect them when someone comes 2 years later and alleges misconduct. You can say, no, we followed this standard and we have these reports written. One of the big things we found with Detective Taylor was that the department paid for his car to be cleaned when he left. So 2 of his co-workers picked up the dog, took it, and paid for the cremation out of their pocket. I think the department paid $730 out of town funds to have his car cleaned. If we have a good internal affairs process and we have that noted, that gets caught sooner. It was eventually flagged. Detective Taylor wrote a check to the town and reimbursed the town for that. But again, a proper internal affairs process in the beginning catches these things because all of your actions are documented. And I hope that makes sense. You interview them, you understand who's doing what, you write down who did what, you write down that 2 sergeants took the dog to be cremated, you write down he went home and he was placed on administrative leave. You write down that, hey, based on timing, this is what we did. The fastest way to get his car cleaned was to do it this way. Now I have a record of everything. Now I see that, hey, Detective Taylor now owes the town. So when that was discovered, brought up to everybody, yep, acknowledged, Detective Taylor wrote the check. reimburse the town. Another internal affairs investigation, and I'm guessing you're not gonna be happy to hear this. This was another one though, and this is the complete opposite of what we have seen occur in this town based upon allegations and inferences of corruption. And again, I think it's important to draw the distinction between discretion and corruption. In this instance, you had a detective leave a badge and consume alcohol while on duty. Okay, this guy was put on administrative leave. I think it was 12 weeks or 11 weeks. An independent company came in to conduct the investigation because of the desire to recuse and to give the public the sense of there's no impropriety here. The town paid for a detective to be home on administrative leave for 12 weeks. You also paid an outside company to come conduct an investigation that could have been conducted by the CPD. And where it landed was right. I believe this detective received a 5-day suspension, which was right. The path to get to these two outcomes was inconsistent and not correct. This bottom investigation should have taken 3 days. And when this allegation comes in, I look at it, I say me, but your command staff looks at it, it gets delegated to a lieutenant. This is the allegation, go investigate it. Again, recusal is not integrity. So, in not that anybody cares, but I'm going to tell you, in my previous life, when I was part of the internal affairs process for DEA, there were people that sat across from me that I've known for decades. And that I actually, my wording to them was, I love you, and I'll do everything I can do to help you, but I also am going to suspend you right now for 12 days because you committed these violations. You broke these policies. That is integrity. Your department is perfectly capable of doing these investigations on their own. And we'll outline briefly the process that we recommended in the report if it's not clear. This investigation should have taken 3 days. It should have came in, it should have been delegated to a sergeant. That sergeant then goes to, or that lieutenant goes to the sergeant of the detective bureau and says, hey, this guy drank on the Cape. Did you know he was on the Cape? Oh, yep, he was conducting this interview on this case. Now I know he's authorized to be where he is. I then call the officer in and I take a statement. That officer gives me the statement. Okay, yeah, I stopped, I had a beer. This is what happened. I left my thing in the car. Great, I memorialize that. I take a statement from the sergeant. When did he report to work, report off to work? I document that, and then I kick those findings up. It's done. It's really that simple. This cost the town close to $30,000 if you add in the administrative leave for an officer that you're not getting work from, and then who also is losing his ability to make a living because he can't work overtime, he can't work shifts. You now, as a town, have a department that you have to hire and or backfill his spot. So the cost rolls over. Because he's on admin leave, I now need to bring someone in on overtime to fill his spot. So it is a continuing process. But this is what I'm talking about. You have two cases and they have the correct outcomes, but the process of how we got to those outcomes was inconsistent. We had, I would say, no less than probably 30 emails stating that the Canton Police Department did not report this to Post. I don't know why it was difficult for people to find. This is a public record. I went on to Post. This is obviously the officer right here. It shows it was reported to Post in accordance with policy. Anybody can find it. I put this in this presentation only to satisfy those people that may be here that may have emailed us and said, this is something you gotta look for. So when we talk about internal affairs, these are some of our recommendations. There are people in this room who will call the chief directly or the deputy chief directly. And unfortunately, times have changed. The fact that we're here shows that times have changed. So we've given our best recommendation is stay in alignment with practices. The chief, the deputy chief should never accept those calls anymore. Because what you've done is now you've made them a part of the investigation. So if someone were to call the chief and say, I want to report misconduct, it should be, thank you, call the front desk, speak to my sergeant, get a complaint form, and we'll start the process. Every complaint form that's filed should be numbered. Every officer should provide a complaint form without hesitation. They should accept it. They should stamp it received and give the person that's filed the complaint a receipt. Here you go. This is your record letting you know we've accepted your complaint. That complaint should then go up to the deputy chief. The deputy chief will review it. And if the allegation's against a sergeant, I'm going to sign a lieutenant. If it's against a detective, I'm going to sign a sergeant. If it's against an officer, I'm going to sign a detective. I want to assign my internal affairs investigation one rank above the person that has the allegation made upon them. That investigation goes down, it's conducted, statements are taken, they're documented, sworn statements are taken, body cameras reviewed, any evidence that is germane to the allegation is collected, it's put into a file, it comes back up to the deputy chief. The deputy chief does not decide that investigation. What he does is he looks at it for completeness and thoroughness. Was enough investigation conducted for a decision to be made on this? If it's thorough, it goes over to the deputy chief of administration. She then reviews it and identifies policy violations. So one example would be, we'll use myself, Officer Matt was accused of telling somebody at Shaw's parking lot to go fly a kite. That complaint comes in, it goes up to the deputy chief. The deputy chief looks at it and says, Matt's on vacation, he's not even here. He then calls down to dispatch, and dispatch says, we haven't had an officer in Shaw's parking lot all day. We haven't been dispatched all day. That complaint can be addressed with a paragraph and closed on face value because it's unfounded. Same process goes through, it gets to the deputy chief. Yep, Matt was dispatched to Shaw's. We did have a call, Matt did go there. Okay, it's not up for him to figure it out. He just kicks it down, it gets investigated, it comes back up. Goes over to the deputy chief of administration. They look at it, they watch the body camera. They see me tell someone to go fly a kite. She says, oh, you can't do that. It's a violation of our professional conduct. There's my policy violation. Then it goes to the chief. Chief is your final adjudicator. There's been instances since we've been here where people in the town, town officials have, and other members of your elected board have called the chief directly and brought evidence to her and alleged misconduct. Once you do that, you now put your chief in the chain of custody of evidence and made her a witness to the allegation, therefore effectively taking her out of the process to adjudicate it. So it's our recommendation to the command staff of the CPD not to not take the call, but when you get the call, say, thank you, stop, please go file a complaint, which is your right as a citizen, with the front desk. Front desk will take that complaint and then it will follow that process that I just outlined to you. We strongly suggest you limit the outsourcing of internal affairs investigations. And we'll talk later about some of the financial findings of the department and some of the shortcomings within the budget allotments that this directly impacts. There's no need to outsource investigations that your department's perfectly capable of conducting. What we do suggest is that a senior lieutenant, a sergeant, and a detective go and receive training on internal affairs investigations. Now, yes, they are investigations. However, there are certain rights that officers have that are protected by the union that your investigators should be aware of. And that is why we say send them to a two-day school for internal affairs investigations, because you want it to be thorough, you want it to stick, you want it to work, you want it to be effective. If you violate due process in this investigation, you've defeated the purpose. Completed investigations will go to the chief for final decisions. Any decision by the chief meets with the approval of the town select board. town bylaws, and in conjunction with the union contract, as has been done. This is pretty straightforward: organization, structure, and governance. Police department has a paramilitary structure. The chain of command is available. Communication flows throughout the department as it should. What do I mean by that? A shift comes off the street at night. Any pertinent activity is provided to the sergeant and then provided to the next shift that's incoming for roll call, so they know what has occurred, what hasn't occurred, what to keep a lookout for, a concern of another town, anything like that. So the flow of information between patrol, detectives, and command staff is very good. The times we were at the department, we were able to see this come into play, particularly as it related to mental health calls. You in this town, if you read the report, have a mental health professional who's probably the most valuable person on your department in terms of their ability to diffuse police encounters, recommend appropriate treatment for people that maybe have a little bit of a mental disorder, and it prevents the police interaction from becoming a legality. And it now has swayed that interaction to really being for the benefit of the citizen in need. I have FOIA requests up here. That's part of the structure and governance. The town has a right to submit FOIAs. You should submit FOIAs. But again, we were asked to look at this stuff. So there's been an increase in FOIA requests. I don't want to misquote myself. Maybe it's gone up somewhere around 8,000% in the past 12 months. But you're right, man. Keep following them. But what we are seeing is your police department has one part-time administrative civilian employee. So every one of these requests is being handled by a deputy chief or a senior lieutenant. And they're tracking the information. We've been there while the information comes in via FOIA, and we have gotten emailed at the same time. So we are aware of FOIA requests being made. We just sat, we watched it take place. We know the FOIA was answered. We know the information went out because we had those same people emailing us back saying, hey, yes, we got that information. Our recommendation for this is that in terms of communication, the department should resume public notifications as they relate to significant events in the town, crimes, construction, traffic, any significant event that would impact the community. It's going to be a town decision. Our recommendation is comment, stay off. There's no benefit right now to the comments. No one's added any value to a post that we have reviewed. It's in the report. But the town does have the right to receive these notifications as they relate to significant events, detours, or police activity within the town. We also recommend the addition of administrative employees, and we'll talk about that again. There was a very big concern with citizens' privacy rights. This is by state law, so any information the police department comes across as it relates to a citizen, there are electronic safeguards in place. There are key logs, there are electronic signatures to show who within the department has accessed this information, who's printed it, who's emailed it, who's looked at it, who's downloaded it. A lot of this information is retained because it's dictated by the Massachusetts General Law Table of Retention, and this is it to the right, right here, in terms of the length of time information obtained by the police department as it relates to a case has to be retained. So it's not arbitrary, it's dictated by law. And again, your police department is in compliance with this as it relates to citizens' privacy and the information they hold. We were asked to look at the management, the operations, and the culture and the morale of the department. We did that. We interviewed every member of the department to include the administrative staff. We interviewed members of the district attorney's office, assistant district attorneys. We interviewed chiefs from neighboring towns, and we did that in a way to get a temperature of the culture and the morale of your department. What I can tell you is that the command staff of the CPD has the respect of both the officers, the prosecutors at the district attorney's office, and the respective chiefs of police of neighboring towns. The resources, as we've seen, have been utilized effectively. When I say that, if anyone watched the audit committee the other night, we were presented with a question as it related to training. And the person that presented the question was unaware that how could there not be money for training? And the easiest and most obvious answer was $383,000 was spent from asset forfeiture money last year just to pay for minimum staffing and shifts. So if I'm $500,000 behind on the monies that it takes just to staff my department to meet legal requirements in terms of officers on the street, that's all money that could have went to training. So when we say they're effective in the decisions they make, decisions may not be popular and there may be other uses for that money, but the money that we've seen spent and go out has been used for any training that's available and also to meet minimum staffing requirements. I don't think this is a shock. The relationship between the department and the community may be fractured. We conduct a lot of interviews. Every officer spoke to us, they did not have to. Yes, we gave each officer the condition of anonymity. So we don't use reports, but we also didn't use names of select board members or audit committee members or other town officials or other people that contacted us. So we didn't afford the police anything we didn't afford anybody else through the condition of anonymity. But some of the things that have occurred, some of the things that brought us here have affected the morale of the department. You guys can take this for whatever it's worth. We were asked to give you a temperature of the morale of the department. This is the temperature. Is you have a department right now that firmly feels if one of them was killed in the line of duty, nobody in the public would care, or half the people in the public wouldn't care. You have guys in this town, and so we take these statements, and then we also watch body camera video. So I can tell you, I've watched numerous body camera videos where an officer has an interaction, and the person that they're interacting with just comes out with hatred and vitriol. And your officers wear it every single day. So all I'm doing is reporting to you the climate. It's going to be up to you to decide what you want to do with it. But I will also say this, while we've been here, your officers have saved the lives of 9 people, one of which has a family member that pickets outside the police department every Friday. But they still, without hesitation, saved that individual's life. So we can only tell you what we observed. And I've talked about some of the mistakes with crime scenes. I've talked about the mistakes in internal affairs. But I also, because you said it on page 4, what do they do well and what can they be improved on? Some of the things they do well is they wear this kind of stuff every single day, and they don't let it affect what calls they go on, how they respond to the call, or more importantly, how they treat the person that's at the scene of the call. So if they got to a call and that person was one of the people there that pickets the department or has said stuff online, that person got the same exact professionalism and treatment from the department as somebody else that was, we'll say, pro-police. Canton Police Department is a civil service department, so there are rules in place for how individuals are hired. Anyone that's hired by the town of Canton is hired with the approval of the town select board. They go to the MPAC training academy. When they graduate, they go through a field training officer program. I believe the minimum requirements for the field training program is 4 weeks. They meet those requirements when they have the staffing and the time to extend the training for an officer to 6 weeks or 8 weeks. They do. We interviewed all 4 field training officers. All 4 field training officers within the department are up to date on their certifications, and they're really, really enthusiastic, good officers. one of the things we noticed is that the sergeant command staff across the board for the Canton PD, aggressive, young, caring officers that actually go out of their way to institute trainings for some of the younger officers. You have a very young department. Brian, what was the number for under 5 years? Yeah, you guys have 12 officers on patrol that have less than 5 years experience. You have 2 other officers in the academy. You have sergeants right now that prior to shifts, and I'm only telling you what we observed. Prior to shifts, we'll sit down with some of these young officers and give them scenarios. Hey, if we're out there and this happens, what do you do? If we get this call, what's your first line of action? If you get this call, what is your responsibilities? Who do we call? How do we handle it? That's a pretty cool thing that these sergeants have started on their own. You have another sergeant that writes an article called The Commander's Quarters. I laugh because he gets a little bit of crap by that. But all it is additional training that he does on his own time, publication he creates on his own, something he sends to the officers as a way to give them a little bit extra training. There's a big difference between training and certification. So for 5 years, I was a senior instructor at the Department of Justice Training Center in Quantico, Virginia. And you have people come through there and they take a 1-week class and they get a certification. That is nothing more than a learner's permit. So until you apply what it is you've learned on a daily basis repeatedly, that's when you become trained. There's a thought that an officer goes to the range and uses his weapon and qualifies that they're certified and ready to go. I think the state requirement, is it annually here or biannually? 2, right? So it's a biannual requirement for an officer to certify. What I can tell you is that shooting your weapons is a deteriorating skill. And if it's not constantly practiced, you lose the ability to do that. So your officers meet their qualification standards with twice-a-year shoots. I think when they can squeeze a 3rd shoot in, they do. So, but here's the issue for that. When an officer goes to shoot and or train, they're being paid, and then another officer has to be paid to take that shift. So we understand there's constraints on some of these training issues. We understand that there's a financial impact to them, but what we are going to say is that your department needs more training. 70% of the officers that we interviewed want more training, and they've asked for more training. It's been entertained, but at the end of the day, it's a financial decision. And when you are $400,000 behind meeting minimum staffing requirements, it's hard to cut that money loose to go provide additional training. One of our recommendations is, and I think this would be in alignment with the fire department, every officer should get 8 additional hours of training on top of what it is they do for qualification and certification. So if I want training to go pull fingerprints, if I'm a detective and I want more crime scene training, I can allocate my 8 hours directly to that. Promotions are done by an outside company. Hanrahan Consulting performs the promotions. It's done via an assessment center. Again, it's a civil service process. So if you're applying for a promotion, there's a formula that the civil service uses. It's 2 times the number of openings plus 1. So if I have 2 openings, I got 4 people plus 1. I have to have 5 names considered for that opening. Officers have expressed a minimum of 5 years experience before being promoted to a supervisor. Civil service requires 1. So that's the law. And being the fact that CPD is a civil service department, that is what they have to follow. We again recommend hiring additional staff in the form of intelligence analysts, dispatchers, and administrative support staff. You have a sergeant who is a police prosecutor. He's also the sergeant of detectives. That's 2 full-time positions. A lot of the work he does as it relates to the police prosecutor's position is pulling court documents, court records, evidence lists, logs, preparation for destruction. That's something that can be handled by an administrative assistant. So that sergeant could easily, on his way home or on his way back to the station, call in and say, hey, I've got these 3 cases, cases 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That administrative staff, that intelligence analyst can go and pull that necessary information, say, yeah, this is set for destruction, this is set for destruction, this has to be retained. An intelligence analyst could service not only the police prosecutor, but also the detectives. You have police officers that are paid well performing administrative functions that could be handled by a new college graduate for maybe half the price, freeing up your officer to go be an officer and do what it is you've paid them to do. Conflicts of interest. We found no cases. The scope of work specifically said, we want you to look at cases where the CPD has been conflicted out and the state attorney or the district attorney has said there's a conflict of interest, you can't work this case. We've not found one instance of that. We did the interviews with the attorney's office. I showed you what the mass law says. Canton PD has never been conflicted out of a case. They've recused themselves, but by law, they have the right to, and in our recommendation, they should work with the state police in every homicide investigation. They've not been conflicted out of anything. We've looked at FOIA requests, investigations, the mental health crisis, mental health contacts, civilian contacts, police interactions, and we've not had any issues of a CPD officer being conflicted out of any of those things. What we do see is that their operations are hindered because of the voluntary recusals. So we're not here to talk about specific cases, but this relates specifically to the John O'Keefe case. 2 officers should have been recused from that case. Deputy chief across the street and a relative to the homeowner. Understandable for those 2 guys to be recused. The rest of the department should have worked that investigation fully, hand in hand with the Mass State Police. But in an attempt to appease the public and give this hey, nothing improper's happened here, we're going to step back, significant communication gaps occurred. And those gaps led to some things and some information not being properly exchanged as it related to that a particular crime scene. So I can't make the recommendation strong enough that the CPD should not be recusing itself from any of these investigations at all. Probably got ahead of myself. Again, no conflicts of interest that we found. The recusals were voluntary. They weren't dismissed from the case. You hear repeated phrases, you were conflicted out of the case. No, they weren't. And if there was a more standard policy and procedure of we're not conflicted out of the case, this is our town, we know the people, we know the players, we know everything, we're going to continue to be a part of this. Again, some of that information wouldn't have been delayed, and possibly some of these things would have different outcomes because information would have been shared at a little bit of a quicker pace. Again, I'd limit the voluntary recusals to only the most extreme cases, immediate family members, neighbors, but immediate neighbors. The fact that like you have a department of 38 people in a town of 25,000, an officer can't recuse himself every time he knows somebody. It's not realistic. And there's an element to community policing, and there's an element to knowing the police officers in your community that I know for a fact have benefited, as I look around this room, 4 people in this room. The fact that you had a family member interact with a member of the CPD, and that CPD knew your family member, an alternate course was taken with your family member, and it benefited that family member. And that's the benefit of a community police department. I worked in New York City, Brian's worked in Chicago, where you didn't know the people you were interacting with, and you just acted. Here, and we've watched it while we were there, the days we were at the department, even the days we were in your city county building, we watched interactions take place that benefited the town and the town citizens strictly because the police officers were familiar with that family. And they knew what looked to be something on face value didn't have to be dealt with. And that goes back to discretion and corruption. So the police department has the ability and should have the ability to use discretion. There's a thought that if they use discretion, that it's corruption, and it's not. So we recommend that we limit those interactions. We interviewed everybody on the Canton Select Board. They have no influence on promotions. They do approve the new hires. Sorry, that was me. There's no designated point of contact. Your command staff reports to the town administrator, who reports to the select board. The select board should have interaction with the police department. It's a healthy thing. So just because there's no interaction doesn't mean we're saying there should be no interaction. We were asked to look at the communications between all select board members and the command staff with the police department. We found that one select board member had communication with the chief, and that communication was request monthly meetings. There's nothing improper about that. There's nothing outrageous about that. Whether or not it's in line with the select boardman code of ethics, we weren't asked to look at that. That's a town decision. But what we could say as a firm, to have city leaders want to meet with the chief of the department seems natural. There was no communication that was outside the professional lines. There was no communication that seemed to be more personal in nature. All the communications that we reviewed were professional and appropriate. I talked about the asset forfeiture fund. The Canton Police Department has a patrolman assigned to the DEA task force. What the DEA does for that patrolman is, one, they provide training to that guy, which is a very good thing. It's a force multiplier. Should the Canton Police Department need federal assistance, that is someone you can call and usually get multiple bodies reporting to the town of Canton. I ran task forces throughout the South that covered the state, and when you have a department of 38, 40 people, should they have an event where they require more bodies, I would get a call and I could put 100 people in a town in a very short time. Because the detective is assigned to the task force, the Canton Police Department receives shares of assets seized by the federal government. So this chart is what has been shared with the Canton Police Department. We went back 10 years. So these are the monies that have come in to the Canton Police Department in participation with their officer on the task force. Everything that is done with these monies is in alignment. These monies can be used for training. They can be used for equipment. I think some of them, maybe tasers, were purchased, which was a great thing. Unfortunately, the majority of these monies recently have been used to pay salaries. So that is one of the things that we addressed, is to meet the minimum staffing requirements. Some of the AF money, asset forfeiture money, has been used to pay salaries. That would be monies right off the top of my head that could be applied to training and new equipment. So we know $381,000 was received in that last fiscal year. $375,000 of that was for staffing requirements. The additional monies were spent on law enforcement equipment, tasers, some body vests, but you can't rely on the asset forfeiture money. So this money varies year by year. So if the federal government seizes $6 million one year, the Canton Police Department is going to get a big chunk of money. If the next year the federal government seizes $105,000, Canton Police Department is going to get a much smaller chunk of money. So this money should never be thought of as a guaranteed thing and or spent before it's received. We were asked to do an in-depth look at police audits. If you read the scope of work, there was a section in there that wanted to know why $91,000 for police details had not been reimbursed. So there's a difference between overtime for staffing requirements That means staffing requirements are the number of officers I need on the street to meet my accreditation and protect the town. A detail is a construction zone, power lines fall, a tree service is taking down trees, someone's building an addition and they need an officer to divert traffic. That's a detail. The way that's structured now is those calls come in directly to the police department. The police department gets the request and furnishes officers to work that detail. The vendor requesting the detail then reimburse the department for the expenditure of that overtime. The $91,000 we were asked to look at was 1.3% of the collectibles. So when you looked at that time frame, the Canton Police Department worked $5.3 million worth of details. $91,000 was outstanding. That is a collection rate of 98.7%. For most people that run a business, that's a pretty good collection rate on your collectibles. Right now, that number is somewhere between 13 or 17,000. So less than 0.32% money's owed from that same time frame. The way the current system is set up is you have your command staff for the police department going out and collecting these monies. That is a horrible practice. It's not in line with best standards. It puts your command staff in a very awkward situation, and it opens up the door for the allegation of impropriety. Why? Because the police department's not a business. They provide a service. If somebody calls and says, I need a police detail to work this construction site, or to work where I'm taking down these trees, or to work this event, your police department should provide that service. At the end of that service, they bill the vendor. A copy of that bill should go to the Department of Finance. And on that bill, there should be specific instructions: remit payment to Town of Canton, Department of Finance. If the bill's not paid, you can't have your command staff knocking on doors asking for money or collecting checks. Visually looking in, that's not a good look for anyone. And then to have your police command staff be in a position to tell a citizen, we're not going to provide you service anymore until you pay us. That's a finance collection issue that should not be a police issue. We look at evidence collection. We talked about this. When I say external factors must be considered, obviously we're speaking about the Mr. O'Keefe case, and I'll address that in a second. The way these things are documented varied. That would go back to one of our recommendations that we made for consistency in report writing, our documentation. I don't mean you send an officer to school to learn grammar. You have an educated department. I'm not talking about that. But the way a report is structured should have the same categories. There was a slide I had up there previously that said document the negative. So this would be an example. If every arrest report was documented in this fashion, details, what happened, where I went, arrest, we'll call it an arrest report. Joe Blow was arrested at this location pursuant to these charges by these guys. Next section, other officers. Even if they weren't involved, if they were there, I list all the other officers that were there. Next section, use of force, none. Compliant, no use of force was deployed. Next section, evidence, none. Next section, valuables, high value items, none. You might say, well, why would you have all these sections and put none, 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 none? Well, because in 3 years, when that guy goes to court and says, hey, that officer punched me, I was arrested, I had $1,000, they stole my money. You have it documented on the front end. You didn't have any money the day of the arrest. We documented it. We didn't deploy any use of force the day of the arrest. So there's an expression within the federal government about documenting the negative is almost just as important as documenting what has occurred. We would say the same thing with evidence. Quite often you don't know what is or what is not evidence when you're there until you understand the nature of the crime and what it is you're looking for. So it's important when you do come across evidence that we document very carefully who found it, where they found it, what they did with it after they found it, where they took it, how they processed it, where it sat, and what was the next event. When it relates to the evidence kits, January 2022, and we had talked about this, CPD did not have evidence kits out there for collection. Why? Because they didn't do it. So I think some of the language we used when we met with the command staff is something can only be unprecedented one time. So that works once to say, hey, we've never had to do this before, fair enough, but now that you've had to do it, you may have to do it again. So we need to make a change. We need to implement some things. So based on some of these conversations with the senior officials in the CPD, they have instituted this where collection kits are available now. They're in sergeant vehicles. Multiple cameras have been purchased. Cameras are in multiple vehicles. They're on multiple shifts. If department cell phones are issued, even if they can't all be issued to every officer, maybe the detectives, the command staff get phones, and maybe there's a phone assigned to a patrol car. Multiple things related to that is that in the town of Canton, you have dead spots in your radio system. Washington Street has spots where when an officer gets out of their car, their portable radio doesn't work. And I know you guys might say, oh, the poor officer. Well, it's not about the officer, it's about you in the town. If I get out of my car and I'm rendering first aid to you, I've already stated to you at least 9 times they've saved the life of an individual in this town, whether they issued Narcan, whether they performed CPR. If I'm out of my car and I'm performing CPR on you and you're slipping away and I need an ambulance and I can't get that ambulance on the radio, I now have to make a decision. Do I leave you, run back to my car and call for an ambulance? Or do I keep working on you and hope somebody else sees me and they call for the ambulance? So that has to be addressed. Worst case scenario, if every guy in your department has a department issued phone, I have some method of communication until these radio issues can be addressed. So a lot of people need to see this. We have received a lot of attention for our report, saying that the use of the leaf blower was a pretty good idea. And I stand by that. So it's easy to sit in your couch 2 years later and go, what in the hell were they doing using a leaf blower? But if you saw in the report, the National Weather Service, January 29th, 2022, was the 7th worst storm you've experienced in the state of Massachusetts. That's saying something. The 7th worst storm in South Carolina is not a big deal, but in Massachusetts, it is a big deal. When I heard of the leaf blower, I thought it was ridiculous. And on my way up here, I looked at Brian and I said, who in the hell would use a leaf blower? So I was in the same position some of you may or may not be in, but I didn't understand it until I saw it. So I think if you watch the use of this leaf blower, there's officers standing all around him. So there's officers all around here. And as you can see, there's not snow blowing everywhere. It's not like snow's dramatically leaving the area and evidence is blowing around. But you can also see on the ground, blood stains are starting to be revealed. And a glass is starting to be revealed. Again, there's officers here and there's officers here, and those officers are looking to make sure anything that blows away, like that leaf, they catch. But as you can see, the use of this leaf blower systematically is revealing stuff under the ground. It was slow, it was methodical, and while it was not something that they teach in most law enforcement categories, whether you like it or not, or whether you agree with it or not, I respect your decision. I'm telling you, as a law enforcement officer of 31 years, this revealed stuff under that snow that wouldn't have been revealed. And if you think about the way the search was subsequently conducted, they did it with shovels. So for those that think the leaf blower was such a bad idea, what do you think a shovel slamming through the snow is going to do to any piece of evidence under the snow? So that is the reason we feel the leaf blower was not a bad idea. And this shows you a study from Anchorage, Alaska, where they have showed the uses of leaf blowers to retrieve tire tracks, to retrieve footprints that were covered in snow, that were revealed, and that molds were able to be taken from. There's another study from the University of Toronto that talks about the benefits and use of that, as well as from Florida International University. So again, not standard, not something you see every day, but as we've already discussed earlier for the town of Canton, that wasn't a case the town of Canton sees every day either. We looked at your evidence storage. You had an independent audit conducted of your evidence in October of 2024. All 16,000 pieces were accounted for. We arrived 1 month after that, so we did not re-inventory your evidence. What we did do was coordinate with Sergeant Becker, and on 3 different occasions, we would show up unannounced and say, I'd like to see these exhibits. And we took a time frame, random exhibits. They were always produced right away in accordance with policy and presented to us. They were sealed appropriately. Your evidence storage areas are under strict monitoring and electronic access. For someone to enter the evidence vault, they got to go through a key card that leaves an electronic print. The hallway's on video. When they go through that door and they enter the evidence processing room, they are also on video. There's no way to access that area without leaving an electronic signature and without being recorded. In accordance with the audit that was done in October of 2024, made several recommendations, garden variety recommendations. One is to have a fire extinguishing system that's not water-based in the evidence room. You know, for obvious reasons, Canton PD has started some of these changes to become compliant with that previous audit. Another recommendation was to separate guns and non-drug evidence. They've done that. So I guess, Carmen, if we want to take a break, we're happy to answer any of the questions you have. That is a 50,000-foot view of the assessment. The report was 206 pages, goes into a little bit greater detail, but they were the major areas of concern that we spoke about. And I guess, Carmen?
I think in deference to Matt, who's been talking for an hour and a half now, we'll let him take a break for a couple of minutes, and then we'll come back for questions. So let's come back in 5 minutes, and we will resume. Okay? Okay, if everybody wants to take a seat, we'll resume again and have questions and answers. Okay, so I'll remind everyone that we have 3 microphones, one in each of the aisles here for Canton residents and one for anybody over here on my left or your right. And once again, when I recognize you at a number microphone, you can begin with your question and I will have the lights here going. And I think it may turn yellow at 1 minute as opposed to 30 seconds. So we'll see how this works. Microphone number 2, please, and your name and your town, please.
Hi, I'm Ashley Bell. I live in Canton. So in the beginning of the report, I think it was under policies, under recommendation 6, I noticed that the audit states that a detective in the Sandra Birchmore case had written that it was suicide in his notes, but you guys had said that she had been killed by strangulation. I just wondered what made you decide to say that, since the Massachusetts medical examiner hasn't officially changed the cause of death in her autopsy report. So I just wanted to see where you guys were. Also, one more question. Would you have wanted this audit to happen if this exact situation was happening in your town? Would you have voted yes for the audit?
Let me answer the first question first. When we were hired to review policy and procedure in relation to crime scene responses from the Canton Police Department. The Sandra Birchmore case was one of the cases that we reviewed police reports on. Numerous police reports that we reviewed, probably 7. Several detectives that responded on February 6th in the second call. And I think there were at least 5 police reports written on February 4th when the responding officers found her. We delineated in the report that one of the detectives inadvertently wrote suicide. No detective would purposely write that when the ME's report had not come back yet, even though the ME's report came back with that finding. I spoke to the detectives. The first ME report came back as the Commonwealth came back that it was a suicide. But he wrote the report prior to that. We had discussions with the detective lieutenant, who was a sergeant at the time, and it was written. I don't think it was written purposely. And to your point on the note on why we noted that the Stone police officer, Matthew Farrell, was later indicted for this strangulation. That was from the indictment from the federal government, from the United States Attorney's Office. That's why that was written in there.
Okay, and I think there was a second question.
Oh, the second question, I'm not really sure. I mean, I'm a lifelong police officer in federal agency. I spent 35 years in law enforcement, my first 9 years in local law enforcement. I was a police officer and detective in Providence before I went on with DEA, where I spent 27 years. I'm not so sure I would have, I don't know, is my answer. I'm not sure.
Thank you. Microphone number 1, your name and your town.
Hi, Mark.
Can I add one thing to that?
Oh, wait, hold on. We have an addition to the last comment.
For clarification on the recommendation also, a police officer can only report on what they observe. So the verbiage should have been apparent suicide. There would have been nothing wrong with that. So a police officer may assess the manner of death, but the coroner's going to really assign the cause of death, right? So if I walk in and I see someone with 3 bullet holes in them, apparent gunshot wound, the coroner's going to say, no, they were strangled, killed, and then shot. So
I'm going to ask you not to speak
Understood.
from your chair.
yes, I'm
Okay.
sorry. That's my full comment. I'm
All
sorry.
right.
I just want to make
Okay.
sure you got your answer.
Okay, thank you. Microphone number 1.
Hi, Mark Grossman, Canton. Fantastic job, by the way. I recently read a comment from someone running for the select board that the Canton Police is a 2-tier system and that many community members were afraid to call 911. There were also comments that certain residents were receiving VIP or preferential treatment. I was wondering, during your audit, did you find any evidence of that?
No, during our audit, we did observe and we were present for members of the community that would call the chief directly. And ironically, they were appointed and or elected officials. So I'm sure that, again, in a town the size of Canton, let's be realistic. If there's 28,000 people, you're going to know somebody. And to have a member of the community call me as a police officer, that should be what you want. However, what has to happen for standards is that officer, if I get a call and it's like, hey, Matt, can you come help me? If it's life or death, yeah, I'm coming. And I'm going to radio in what's going on. If it's Matt, someone knocked my garbage can over, it's going to be like, hey, Mark, I get it. Do me a favor, call the desk, file a complaint, and then we'll go. The specific answer to your question, do we see special preferential treatment? No, we haven't seen that.
Thank you. Microphone number 2.
My name is Alan Keith. I'm a resident of Canton.
Proceed.
I have questions in 2 areas. One, with respect to the asset forfeitures, which I was, to say the least, shocked. Is it, in your experience, common or ordinary practice for asset forfeitures to remain with the law enforcement rather than reverting to the town for an appropriate appropriation?
Yes, now I'm going to let Brian talk more about that because he handled that, but that money is specifically for the town. So under DOJ guidelines, after that money is seized, it goes back to the department to be used for law enforcement purposes, be it training, be it the purchase of additional equipment.
So, and I guess part of your question was, should the town approve all the expenditures of that money? Say the chief wants to go out and buy 15 tasers for her police officers. I mean, that's a town decision, but me sitting here as a career law enforcement guy, I would say I think I know what that money should be spent on, whether it's tools for the officer, maybe a new police car, things of that nature, but also in concert with her boss, would be the town administrator, if that kind of answers your question. I mean, that money is overseen by the finance department. So it's not, my understanding, because when the statistical data that I received that directly from Town Hall, from Allison Pulaski, I think her last name was Podolsky. Yeah, so I had a meeting with her and we went over that. And I went back 10 years, but I actually went back even further because I think in the scope of work, it's asked us to go back 25 years. So I went back 25 years on all the money that was received from the AF, which is equitable sharing from criminal investigations, whether it's from DEA cases or Homeland Security or others of the like, and from the state forfeitures. So,
Okay, sir, you had one more question, you said?
Yes, during the course of the Karen Reed case, it came to light that the prior chief had allowed access to the Canton Police building by a member of another law enforcement agency, just as I guess, a professional courtesy, or maybe because they were friends. Was this covered in your report, or were you aware of this and comment on that practice?
yes, it's covered in the report. There's actually a memorandum of understanding between the special agent in charge of the ATF in Boston and the chief of police of Canton. It's active. There's an office there. I guess we call it like a satellite office, where I think at one time there were 2 ATF agents that had access to their own office, and they had access to the Canton Police Department, swipe cards, similar to like we had when we showed up for the audit. The chief gave us access cards so we can come in and out. But yes, I mean, he had access and he had a right to be there. The ATF agent, he has an office there still. So there is a MOU in place, and it's active, and it's I think we saw him there a few weeks ago when we were working. So yes.
Hold on, you have 56 seconds left for a follow-up question. Go ahead.
You didn't find any impropriety with this?
No, the answer is no. That's why I noted the MOU that is in place and it's active.
Thank you. Microphone number 1, please.
Hi, Liza Colburn, random Canton citizen. I have 2 questions. First is, there have been a lot of terms tonight that are blurry to a civilian, and having some clarity on them would be helpful.
Sure.
I don't know if they're in the report or not. In a town where 50% of our force lives here and additional officers grew up here, I think these terms need some clearer parameters for at least civilians, probably for the force as well. But you talked about recusal, discussion versus corruption. I'm sorry, discretion versus corruption, integrity, and then conflicts of interest. I didn't see perceived conflicts of interest, but that's potentially also something we need to consider, or impropriety. So, one, are these definitions net out anywhere where we can see that? Like what defines integrity or discretion versus corruption, things like that? Where can we find the inside baseball language?
Okay, in terms of integrity, probably nowhere other than the dictionary. And I'm not being a smart aleck, but in terms of legal ramifications, a recusal is when a person perceives that there's an outside influence that would prevent me from being objective. So it doesn't mean there's not an outside influence. It doesn't mean that I don't know somebody. It means my relationship with somebody would prevent me from being objective. If that's the case, then I would step back and say, I need to recuse myself, remove myself from this environment because I can't be objective. So that is a self-imposed in law enforcement. You know, in rare circumstances, somebody from above may recuse somebody. Just say, hey, I don't want this. In the case of Canton Police Department, then Chief Berkowitz said, we're going to recuse ourselves from this aspect. So that was dictated by the chief to the guys, yet it was self-imposed by the chief. Makes sense? It wasn't external where someone said, hey, you guys are out. And then discretion is every officer has discretion. So I have the ability to arrest or not to arrest. And in this environment, in a town community, with a police force that intimately knows the community, that's a very good thing. So garden variety, Joe has kids. They knocked over a garbage can. They stole Doritos. I show up and I have the choice now. Do I arrest this kid and impact his career and give him a record and or let him face charges? Or because I know his parents and I know when I go speak to Mr. Joe Blow, this kid's going to get the tar beat out of him and it'll never happen again, I have the discretion to go do that. Because there's a fine line. Do you want to ruin the life of every young adult because they've done something stupid? Now, it's a fine line. Do they do something serious? Then it is what it is. But that's what I talk about. So because I choose not to arrest this young man for shoplifting, the store owner, one, has to say, I'm not going to press charges. All right, so that's my victim. And he says, I don't want to press charges. I'm not going to do anything like that. I still now have that discretion. I'm going to take him to his parents. I'm going to let his parents discipline him because I know the family. They're a good family. The kid did something stupid, and I'm going to give him that chance. That's not corruption. That's discretion. It would be corruption if the guy wants to press charges, and I say, no, you don't want to do that, and I talk him out of it. Or if I take the kid out and say, run, that's corruption. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it's blurry. It does, totally.
Well,
But I understand where it can get a little blurry.
It is
And that's where
blurry.
if you know somebody, the rules may be a little different for you.
Quite possibly, but if the department's documenting everything, then it's transparent because that contact I just described should still go on paper. So the fact that I take that route of discretion doesn't mean I don't document it. It doesn't mean I don't record that contact and I don't put on paper what my decision was. So it can be done without a sense of it's trying to be hidden.
So the second part of my question, because I think I still have time, is speaking to the recusal.
Mhm.
If a local department has recused themselves because of a conflict of interest or perceived conflict of interest in the instance of an unattended death.
Yep.
Once MSP is on scene or taken over, apparently you don't really have to pass the baton, but if they've recused themselves, is it protocol for the perceived murder weapon to end up back in CPD custody? In chain of command back at CPD versus say at an MSP barracks?
And of course, the answer to that is if I've recused my whole department, no. But what was done is there was supposed to be a recusal as it related to the in-depth interviews. Now I'm letting them use my facility. So, that's a hair split that everyone's going to have an opinion on, which is why our recommendation is don't recuse yourself. You're a police department. You're a professional police department. Do your job. If you have officers that you don't feel have the ability to do their job without recusing themselves all the time, then there's a bigger problem in the system. And the only thing we can tell you sincerely is based on what we observed, that's not the case with the police department.
So would it have been appropriate if the body was found on the lawn of a
Yeah,
detective's
You're
brother?
actually out of time, and I'll tell you what, if you want to come back after the other people who are waiting have had a chance, you can do that, okay? Microphone number.
Yikes. Hi there, Trish Boyden from Canton. Quick question regarding January 29th, 2022. Do you think Officer Lank should receive disciplinary consequences for answering his cell phone from witness Jen McCabe and going to interview her and other witnesses all at the same time, as opposed to telling her this is a conflict of interest? Someone will be contacting you shortly from the police station.
No, I don't.
Okay, why?
Pe- My understanding is Sergeant Lank was one of the lead detectives on the 29th. My recollection is Sergeant Good called Sergeant Lank and also Lieutenant Gallagher at around 6:05, 6:06 a.m., shortly after receiving the call from Jennifer McCabe where they had found Mr. O'Keefe. And he has the ability, the experience to conduct interviews, to respond. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary with him taking the call. The second call that he received when they cleared the scene, and I talked about this with numerous detectives, including Mike Lank, who I have a lot of respect for. I think he's a good investigator. In a perfect world, the second interview, thank you for calling. Come over to the police department and we'll put you on the record and we'll get the rest of the story, meaning we'll conduct a further witness interview relating to the information that she had on the defendant, Ms. Reed. So hopefully that answers your question.
It didn't, because she didn't go to the police station. They did it at someone's home, and then they did it at her home. So she didn't go to the police station for any interviews.
My understanding is that about 6:40 in the morning, there was a couple interviews. One, Sergeant Lank went into the house and had a discussion with Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, and Matthew McCabe, and I got that directly from a police report. Later on that morning, around 9 a.m., Jen McCabe called Mike Lank while he was at the Canton Police Department and asked him to come to 34 Fairview Road. He responded back over 34 Fairview Road, where he received more information from the witness, meaning Jen McCabe. I didn't see anything wrong with any of that. In a perfect world, the interview at 9 a.m. probably they should have considered bringing him to the Canton Police Department. I am not unaware that Sergeant Lank, I didn't read any police reports that he responded to Jen McCabe's house and conducted an interview. But what I will tell you again is Mike Lank should not have been recused from conducting that interview. And secondly, he's a very experienced detective, and no, he should not have been disciplined.
Okay, folks. Okay, let's try and keep it down so that we can use the time we have to get questions and answers from Three Stones here. Microphone number 1, please.
Yes, Rita Lombardi, Canton resident. I had a bunch of questions on my phone and they just disappeared. I don't know why, but they did. So anyways, I'm just going to wing it here. I think they got inverted somehow. I don't know. But anyways, I appreciate the report that you guys have done. I appreciate you coming here. I appreciate, the report. I think a lot of it sounded reasonable to me. Some of it sounded lenient to me. And, one of the questions I have is this is a plan and I appreciate changes were made in the moment. That's wonderful. What plan is in place to make sure that there is ongoing evaluation and remedy for things that are going awry, and who's in charge of that, and how is that communication process going to work?
Well, that would be incumbent upon the town administrator, the select board, and the chief to all be on the same page. We made some recommendations. The chief and her command staff, and by the way, they have a very good command staff, Patty and Tommy, they know what they're doing, as well as the other 3 lieutenants that we have had a lot of interaction with over the last 4 months. We've made some recommendations. She's already implemented some of those changes. She's in the process of completing the rest of them. She reports directly to Charlie Duty, and the recommendations that she's already implemented and ones that she's in the process, that's between her and the town administrator.
Okay, sure.
One of the areas of the scope of work asked us to speak about evaluations. So your chief, evaluates her deputy chiefs or has the ability to, and your town administrator, as a direct report for your chief, should prepare an evaluation for the chief to be reviewed by the town select board. So everybody is held accountable. And as far as our documentation practices and some of these recommendations, if they're done, they speak for themselves. So you as a citizen and or Ms. Boyden or whoever as a select board, if they request this information, it should be able to be produced.
We have learned over the last couple of years that we really don't have a performance management process. And that, I think, is a major contributing factor, because if you don't hold people accountable, then how are they ever going to know what they need to do and need to do better?
That's fair. Yeah.
And I know that you interviewed some people, and look, the death of John O'Keefe was tragic. And the way that investigation was handled and mishandled is why we're all here. And, you know, people are accountable to follow procedures, whether they're trained or not. And you would think that somebody trained, they're trained in crime scene investigations. You don't have to be trained. All you have to do is watch TV, and we know the basic 101 of crime scene. You know, and I know I'm just
Not
making a
really,
joke.
but I understand.
Do you know
Okay.
what I'm saying? We know how to ride a bicycle. If we're
Sure.
trained to do something, you know, just like the pilot when the Hudson, Miracle over the Hudson, you know, he was trained to do what he did, but it doesn't happen all the time. But when it happens, you need to pull up those resources and do your job.
Okay,
And when you
ma'am,
don't,
I'm going to stop you
Right.
there, because we
Understood.
have, we have your
Understood, yes,
question,
ma'am.
absolutely, about the recommendations. And I will say that any implementation of recommendations is not on our agenda today. Today's agenda is about the report, the methodology of the report, the findings of the report, and specifically what was recommended. But in terms of what the implementation is, that's for another meeting on another day. Let's go to microphone number 2, please.
Thank you, Ms. Moderator. Greg Murphy, Canton resident. I want to preface by saying that I was one of the citizens that signed the initial petition that led to the special town meeting where this audit was authorized, and I voted for the audit. But I did this mainly because I viewed an unbiased audit as potentially the only way to renew the trust between the police department and the citizens of Canton. Trust is the key element and overall goal of why most people voted for the audit. Five Stones even stated this in their report by saying, quote, "A relationship built on trust and confidence between the employees of the police department and the citizens of the community is crucial for achieving law enforcement goals," end quote. Many town members have been calling for a meeting like this to speak about the issues and ask questions. I think there should have been several meetings like this during the audit process. That would have allowed members of the town to be able to speak to it. There didn't seem to be a formal process for that. I attended all the audit meetings, and I knew of no way to reach out to you, apparently that other citizens knew about, or they just took it upon themselves to do so. So I think that the Five Stones missed a key part of the process to help us reestablish trust in the Canton Police. That said, I would like to ask questions of the
But
audience.
may I address that right there? We have no say on how that contract was written. So if there were to be updates, we would have provided them. And I can tell you, after our first trip up here in November, I received an email from Mr. Clough on November 27th. We provided Mr. McCarty an email and provided him an update on our first trip up here. Mr. Clough then reached out to me and said, well, perhaps you, Mr. Germanowski, want to brief everybody. So I did. I forwarded that email to everybody. I was then given direct, specific instructions. I have one point of contact, and that's it. The way the contract was written is we did the investigation. And this is very unusual. Usually you provide a report. You don't provide a report and then go to a town meeting and then go to a town presentation, which we're fine to do. But regarding this presentation, the timing of it, we have nothing to do with that. And we specifically said, tell us where to be, when to be there, and we'll be there. In terms of the status and updates, if you go back to the interview, I had said at that time, I'll be your point of contact. If anybody has a question, call me, email me. I didn't get any. Now, I did get a lot of emails that we addressed in the report. So I just want to make that clear. That was not an option Five Stones had. So we're following what was written in the contract in terms of how we responded and when.
Okay, microphone number 2, your question.
So yeah, I'll let others comment on that, and I'll ask my question. Given your review of the Canton Police Department hierarchy, and referencing the audit committee meeting on April 3rd, you mentioned the chief reports to the town administrator who reports to the select board. And in your presentation today, you stated our bylaws designate the select board as the police commissioner. So as part of your review, did you consider the hierarchy of the police chief above the police chief? And I ask because the select board has repeatedly been referenced by people in town as the police commissioners or police superintendents, and they have stated they do not tell the police how to do their job. Whoever is responsible, given the managing person or body, would rarely have detailed knowledge about policing. I have some related questions for this.
For a town with a structure like Canton, is this the best hierarchy for us to have for the police? Or who would you recommend serve as police commissioner or police superintendent? And what responsibilities should the person or body in this oversight position be expected to do in terms of setting policy and direction, overseeing operations, managing resources and strategy, and setting expectations for leadership?
Thank you.
First of all, thank you for the question. It's a very long question. It's a multi-faceted question. The select board, I guess they're all police commissioners, I guess all 5 of them, from what I read. I think the system that you have in place right now where Chief Rafferty reports to the town administrator, I don't see anything wrong with that. I think it's such a small town. You have such a small select committee. There's only 5 people on the committee. I don't think there's because we interviewed them all. We interviewed all 5. I don't think anyone is missing any information. I think the information flow when they need, if they have a call, say, hey, what's going on in the town, they get it. There's not a lot of communication back and forth directly to the chief. I think Matt had addressed that in the presentation. But I think the hierarchy, the way it is right now, where the chief reports to the town administrator, I think that is appropriate. Be similar to, the chief of police in the city of Providence having, direct dialogue with the mayor, right? I mean, it's set up a little different. It's a bigger city, but it's not uncommon. When I was running the DEA office in Chicago, I had a lot of interaction with the mayors, a couple of different mayors. I was with Rahm Emanuel was there, and then Lori Lightfoot, and the superintendent of the Chicago Police, which is the 2nd largest police department in the country. It was direct right to the mayor. If an alderman called the superintendent of the police, I think there's about 50 aldermen in the city of Chicago, he would pick up the phone. So I think the way it's set up right now is appropriate, if that answers your question.
Thank you. We'll go now to microphone number 1, and I do see you over there at microphone number 3, but we're going to take some more questions from Canton residents first. Go ahead.
Hi, Brenda Sweeney, Canton resident. On page 174 of your report, you say, we have no information that would indicate any involvement with the member of the Canton PD as it relates to town meetings, petitions, and elections, or in using municipal resources in anything other than an official capacity. So having said that, how do you explain an officer of the Canton Police Department visiting one of the petitioners or confronting them, asking them where they signed the petition, who was the person that asked you to sign it, demanding names of other people who gathered signatures, and stating that he was investigating a very serious crime? How is that not interfering with the petition?
Because he's investigating a crime. So there was an allegation made, Ms. Sweeney, there was an allegation
Doesn't
made.
that go to the election committee?
No.
Doesn't that go to the state?
It's a crime. That's what the police department does. A person whose name was on your petition filed a complaint. We just talked about that here. Everybody has a right to file a complaint. That citizen contacted the Canton Police Department and said, I did not sign this petition.
And when they were asked to identify that person so we could verify they actually did sign the petition, they refused, and then it was gone, went away. So is there a report on that?
I don't know. I'm sure you could FOIA that, but what I can tell you is, and I don't say that in a smart aleck way, 206 pages, we know this material pretty well, but what I can tell you, that specific incident was the result, that was an investigation as a result of a citizen's complaint. So we had just met with the command staff of the police department and said, you have to respond to a citizen's complaint. You don't arbitrarily sweep them away. So I wouldn't call that misconduct or interference. I would call that a police officer doing their job.
Thank you. We'll go to microphone number 2.
Susan Harrington, Canton resident. I have a few comments that lead to an important question. Thanks to the entire Canton Police Department for their cooperation and commitment throughout this process. Additionally, thank you to the Audit Committee, Five Stones, the petitioners, and every resident whose support made this effort possible. This is an important step toward healing divisions in our community and rebuilding trust. It highlights what we are doing well and where we can do better with ways to make meaningful investments in our police department and strengthening communication. Our public safety personnel put their lives on the line every day, and we owe it to them to invest in the best training, resources, and leadership possible. You've identified the need for additional training, enhanced communication, and clearer policies to help officers do their jobs more effectively, steps that I fully support. At the heart of public safety is public trust. You have identified issues in the relationship between the police, the town administration, and the community, and given us a door to rebuild and strengthen it. We need to focus on community engagement, increasing transparency, providing systems and more opportunities for dialogue and connection to ensure our police, feel supported and our residents feel heard when it comes to public safety concerns. Though beyond the scope of your work, I can tell you that police officers are not the only ones being harassed in this community. Many citizens who have voiced their concerns have been anonymously targeted. So, my question is this. Beyond what is mentioned in the report, I'd like to know the concrete recommendations you have for rebuilding the relationship between the police, the police department, the community, and the town leadership. Specifically, would you tell us what's worked well in other communities with a similar breakdown of trust?
Thank you.
I think the community policing models that started in 1992, so I'm dating myself, when Bill Clinton was the president, that's when he rolled out, that's when community policing really got some traction with small towns, major cities all across the country. I think Canton, the town of Canton is kind of already set up that way. I think these two unfortunate, awful, tragic deaths have obviously put a spotlight on this great small town. And I would just say community policing, keep the dialogue going. I think the select board and the town administrator and the town, because you're such a small town, it's only 25,000 people, just have engagement, have ride-alongs. I remember when I was a young patrolman, they'd call me in at 7 o'clock at night, and next thing I know, I got Senator Chafee's chief of staff riding with me for like 4 hours. Start something like that. You want to learn about policing? Have ride-alongs. Hey, here's what we do from 3 to 11. Here's what we do from midnight to 3 a.m. Break some ground that way. But it's a two-way street, right? So, and listen. You got really good young cops. You get some really good leaders in the department, and I think you have some good leaders on the select board, and you got a good town administrator. I mean, we've probably spent about 35 days in town over the last 4 months. So we know the town. I know New England well. I grew up here. But I think keep driving home the community policing. It's not going to be something where any of your patrolmen or any of your leaders are going to back off from. I think they would embrace it. So if that answers your question.
The problem with that is it's not very scalable. It just is a community, a civilian advisory board, something that you have found to be useful?
This town doesn't need a civilian advisory board. You probably have, like Matt had described, we went back to 1991 on complaints. There were 75 complaints. Every complaint that we looked at was addressed, positive or negative, where an officer received some time off or there was some counseling and demotions. There's not a need for it. You don't have that type of activity going with the cops. You get some good police officers. Listen, they're going to make a mistake. I make mistakes every day. I'm sure everyone in here does, but a civilian review board is not something this town needs.
Thank you. We're going to go to microphone number 1 now.
Jim Leonard, Canton resident. On page 104 of the audit report, where it talks about the case file audit of damage to a house under construction, there's a sentence that reads, we found prosecution was declined by the Massachusetts Environmental Police. I'm wondering what they had to do with that incident.
I know that because I wrote that. I reviewed a document from the environmental police. They were brought in. The chief of police brought them in because of the, I think it was a dead rabbit that one of the kids was kicking around in the house. That's why they were brought in, because I think they wanted to see if there was going to be a prosecution, if they could actually charge the person responsible. And that's what that was what was noted in the report.
Them with what?
I guess killing the rabbit.
Police?
They have the jurisdiction on that, yes. I guess animal death in the.
I thought they have to do with watercraft and recreational vehicles and ATVs.
I'm just telling you what I read. There was a declination from that department from.
Oh, I see. In some Canton police report?
In the documents from that incident from the house party.
What document?
There was police reports.
Okay, that's what I asked. Okay.
Yeah, police reports, and there was a letter from that agency that they were declining prosecution on the individual that kicked the dead rabbit inside the house.
I see. Okay, thank you. And then I just have one more question. Can you please post your PowerPoint slides to the Canton website, probably like as a PDF?
I think we're going to do that. After tonight, we're going to provide that to the Police Audit Committee.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, and we'll go to microphone number 2.
Cindy Thomas, Canton resident. You talked a number of times about, now I'm not going to get the word, corruption versus discretion. Thank you. I took advantage. When I was 17, I got stopped for a speeding ticket. The officer looked at my driver's license and said, "Oh, you're Roger Searle's daughter. Turn around, go back, and come back at the right speed." That was good. But
Sure.
the next kid who came down that street where the officer didn't know them may not have gotten the same break. And so my question about discretion isn't about any campaign, about any of the comments that have been made about that, but it's more about equity and how we make sure that our residents are treated in an equitable way, because we have a limited number of officers. They're not going to know the parents of every kid who gets caught at seasons, maybe lifting a candy bar. And so how do we make sure that that we have an equitable approach when we think about discretion with members of our community?
Sure.
And I think that's where I struggle when you talk about discretion and having so much of that be based on, the officer knows the family. They know that when that kid goes home, they're going to get, dealt with in the family, and it's going to be handled. So could you talk more about that? Because I think that's a
Yes.
really important issue in our community today.
Yes, you just provided my answer in that discretion's not me throwing a dart at a wall saying, do I feel like arresting them or do I not? It's a decision I make, a conscious decision based on what I know about this person. So if I don't know what family they come from and I don't know their parents and I don't know how they're raised, I might not use discretion. I'm going to use discretion as an officer when I think it's in the best interest of the citizen. The more I know about that individual, the better, which is why we emphasize don't lose your community police force. I understand you have issues with it, and they can be worked out, especially in any forum where there's direct communication. But when you take the discretion away from an officer, now every person that gets pulled over for everything gets a ticket, regardless of who they are, how many, you don't want to take the discretion away from an officer, but just understand when I say discretion, it's not a random choice. It's not like, yeah, I'm just going to use my discretion and let this guy go. My decision should be based on a series of facts that, when stated, are in the best interest of the citizen. And even though I don't execute the arrest through discretion based on facts that benefit the civilian, I should record that police contact. So there should be a report of that with my decision not to arrest. And that goes back to Well, I don't know if it was Miss Lombardi or the other lady that spoke about integrity, and that's what it's about. You have officers that are willing to do that. They're not hiding from their decisions, but you make a decision, much like our report. I understand not everyone likes our report. And people say, oh, we're soft. We weren't brought here to kill anybody. We were brought here to assess policies and its application and recommend improvements. And where we found it, we recommended it. Where we didn't, as it was asked for, we didn't, and we said what was doing well. But an officer's discretion is based on a variety of justifiable, articulable facts that should go into to a report. Does that make sense?
It does, and I guess and I like that discretion is important. What I hear you saying that I think is also equally important is when discretion is used, that it's also reported and documented so that there's some transparency about that.
Right.
I think I heard that. And
Yes,
then
ma'am.
I just think we have to be cautious to make sure, because our officers can only know so many people in our community, and that leaves a lot of people potentially more vulnerable because they don't have those connections and relationships, and that
Sure.
discretion may not get applied equally. And this isn't about campaign, it's more about equity. And we have a lot of newcomers, people who I've been here over 30 years, but we have people in our community who've been here a year or 2 years, and they may not have those same connections and relationships. And so that's where my concern lies. Thank
Understood.
you.
But I will say you don't have any officers that are looking to hurt anybody either. So, no, of course. Yes, ma'am.
Issues with morale that we need to take very seriously in this community.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. We'll go to microphone number 1 now.
Rita Lombardi, Canton. This town, the last couple of years, has been through extraordinary times, extraordinary hardships. We've lost family and loved ones over the things that are going on in this town. And we really need to come together. And that's what we're hoping to do. I was a little saddened by the comments by some of the officers that you spoke to who had the morale issues. We have morale issues too. Sure. And, the morale issues, I wonder if those officers took any responsibility for the morale issues, because the morale issues are on both sides. And if you don't own what has caused the morale issue, then you can never fix the morale issue.
But when you watch a videotape from a body camera and a person speaking to the officer says, I hope you die, how do you take responsibility for that? Like,
I'm not aware of that.
No, I understand you're not. And like there's probably another 500 pages of information that could have gone into the report, but the report we gave you, we tried to bring you the recommendations and the result. So I believe every officer we interviewed, when we brought mistakes to them, acknowledged, this could have been better in hindsight, but hindsight's not 20/20. It's like 220. You can see from 200 feet what someone else has to be at 20 feet to see, because everything's already happened. So the officers, no one has shirked responsibility. Again, but I think there's public themes being put out by people that just aren't true. And now how do you, like, for both sides, I understand, but how do you take responsibility when now we're not even in reality anymore? It's hard.
Yeah, and this is our town, and I know somebody else said that. This is all of our town.
Yes, ma'am.
Everybody who lives here, this is our town. And what we do in this town, what people externally do, doesn't mean the people in the town have done it. And I want to come together. I want to work with the police department. I want to work with everybody in my community so that we can be the best that we can be. But in the report, when it says, it's kind of like blaming the community, and that's not going to get us anywhere.
No, but and we don't mean to
And I'm not
blame-
being critical.
No, but this is integrity. It's okay to tell me that or disagree. We're not blaming the community. We're simply saying this has occurred.
Yeah.
And this is the result. Was that the direct cause? I don't know. But what we know is there's a lot of vitriol going towards the department. They're not babies, they're not crybabies. They can take it. Like when we sat in the room and quite candidly said, hey man, this is not right. This is a mistake. It was good. Like there was like, hey, I get it. We can be better. I want to be better. Let's get more training here. But it's just when things get so ugly both ways, that's where it breaks down. And to go back to Ms. Harrington's statement, it's going to take communication. in this kind of form. And now, is it public is the best way? I don't know, because I know there's people in this room that aren't happy with us. But our findings are the findings, and that's where we're
Yeah,
at.
I
So-
appreciate your findings.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
absolutely appreciate your findings. And did you see any evidence of any corrective action? Like if somebody grossly, didn't perform their duties, was there documentation of corrective action? Because that's what we need.
Yes, yes.
So you did see that?
I did on the spot, yes.
Okay. Well,
Yes,
that's
ma'am.
good to know.
Yes, ma'am.
That's good to know. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And we'll go now to microphone number 2.
My name is Jan Chamberlain, Canton resident, and I have not read the report, but I did have one quick question about an incident that also occurred in our town. Our chief of police accidentally hit a pedestrian in a crosswalk in Rentham. We did not hear about it until Turtle Boy uncovered it, and we all know Turtle Boy. And I just have a question on the way that was handled by our chief of police and by our select board, and was that anything that you looked into?
We spoke to the chief about that incident. She immediately notified her boss, who's the town administrator. Where that went from there, did it get back down to the select board people? I don't know, but we had a long discussion with her about it. It's an ongoing civil litigation with the town. I don't think I should further comment on that because it's in litigation.
I didn't read the report and I didn't know if it was in there and
There
how
was-
you proceeded.
There was nothing improper. She was driving her police vehicle home and there was an accident.
Exactly. And
Accidents
we
occurred
read
every day.
through Turtle Boy that it
Mm.
was reported to the Rentham police. And we just talked about the word transparency and communication. And I think that's something that the town was looking for with that maybe the communication was more forthcoming from our select board or from our administrator. The second thing I would like to say is, it was a really close vote. We had a special town meeting. It was a matter of single digits and how the difference came out. We had a chair appointed to the audit committee who you worked with. I watched and attended most of those meetings and also the interview committee meeting with you in the library. We had a very acrimonious atmosphere on our audit committee. Now that the audit has taken place, what is the benefit to our town so that we can say, okay, there were pros and cons, people were for and against, it happened, it's over, we have the results. What is the benefit? How was it a positive to have the audit?
I'll just go right off the top of my head with that. One, let's be honest.
Felt it was very necessary to have.
Audits are not bad.
Right.
An assessment of what you're doing and an evaluation of where you could do better, regardless of the profession, is never a bad thing. But I think if we're going to be candid, the audit may have morphed here because there was a strong sense or a thought of impropriety and conspiracy. So when you say, what benefit do you have from this audit? I can tell you, we saw zero evidence of corruption, conspiracy, cover-up, intentional manipulation of.
Okay, folks, we can't hear the answers if you drown them out.
No intentional manipulation of evidence. And people say, well, how do you know? You don't have a crystal ball. I don't. But when you are in a field for 31 years and you look at an officer's actions, not based on what we know today, based on what they knew then, and then there's an assessment of were their actions reasonable, based on what they knew, based on the information that was out. Everything that happened was reasonable. Looking back, we could be better in some areas. We deviated in some areas, but there's no corruption. The second thing I can tell you is the recommendations we made, the majority of which were discussed with the police department before the report came out. Because again, as a town citizen, I would think you would be upset if we brought up the recommendations today for the first time. And I say, yeah, we observed this the first week of December. We've just let it continue for 4 months incorrect until today. So most of these recommendations have already been implemented. For example, the internal affairs recommendations, there have been 2 subsequent complaints since we've been here after we talked to the command staff and said, hey, there's a much better way to do this. And in fact, this should be done this way. Subsequent complaints were handled that way. and they were adjudicated and handled by the police department and documented properly where all the information exists. So in terms of crime scene stuff, changes have been made. Evidence kits have been purchased, cars have been equipped, cameras have been purchased. There's a plan to send guys to additional training and additional schools to handle this. And I'm hoping there's a thought amongst the town now that you want your police department involved and you're not going to recuse them. So looking back, what'd you get from the audit? I think you have a police department that's going to be better. They've made improvements, they've made enhancements, they're going to make additional training improvements. Hopefully you have a town staff that realizes there's budget issues that need to be addressed, and that's a town decision to allocate those monies. And as a town citizen, I was asked this the other night, do the residents of the town of Canton need to be afraid of their police department? No, you don't. So that would be my thoughts to you on what the takeaway from the audit is.
Can I also just say, so for the people who voted for or against, it's time to give it a rest, that it's over, we did it, we should be able to move forward now. And I'm always concerned that our town is still not ready to move forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll go to microphone number 1.
I'm, excuse me, Mark Grossman, Canton. I feel fortunate to live here with a great chief and a great group of officers. So I think you just stated, but again, just to be clear that there was no evidence of tampering or corruption, correct, in regard that you found? With
None that we observed.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
Thank you very much. I know we still have a couple of more Canton residents, but a gentleman at microphone number 3 has been standing there for a really long time, so we'll
It's all
take
right.
his
It's
question.
all right. Jonathan Camo, Attleboro, Mass. So in regards to the Tim Taylor incident, you described that there was 2 other incidents that you guys looked at.
Three.
And both, or
Three.
3, and they included where the dog got into the people's vehicles and they didn't know about it.
Yes.
Okay. This officer knowingly brought his dog to work, went on the clock, and normally would then bring it to doggy daycare. Was anything in the record of that he was spoken to about that habit of bringing your dog to work on hours and then bringing it to doggy daycare? Secondly, once that dog died and it's a crime scene, did they go through the proper investigation like they investigated the other scene, the other dogs? Did they document this? And it was 2 days later that they actually did the cleaning and signed off on it. And then it wasn't for another month that the town of Canton paid for it. And then you said he did pay the town back. Do you know how much longer after the month later that the town paid for it that he did pay the town back?
All right, so help me, John, 'cause there's multiple questions there. So first question was, did they do any interviews or the process of him bringing his dog? So he doesn't normally bring his dog to work, which is what led to that tragic incident. Because when he got to work, it wasn't the normal course of business, if that makes sense. So him having the dog that day was not in the normal course of his day, nor was it something he's done on a regular basis, which is what led to that tragic event of him forgetting his dog. So you have that aspect into terms of like how it happened. Secondly, they did interview him. We read some stuff, but we didn't see the documentation like we would have wanted to see. But then we also interviewed Tim Taylor, and we also interviewed the other officers involved in the department. And it's our feeling that, yeah, it was a horrible accident. And this guy is still crushed to this day. So during our interview, which was probably a month and a half ago, him being forced to talk about this still brought him to tears. So I'm just stating facts, however you want to interpret them. So yeah, I have a clear, unquestioned knowledge that it was a horrible, horrific accident. And he should not have been charged because it's destroyed his family.
But wouldn't that have been the prosecutors and the judges' determination, not the Canton Police Department's? Did you say discretion, and that certain crimes, there's certain levels, and in Massachusetts that there is a chapter on that?
Right. So then when they reach out to animal control, that falls into the animal control side. Now you have a series of events where the chief wasn't in town. And your animal control officer also wasn't in town. So you had an assistant and a backup in both positions. What I can tell you is the decision to prosecute was not made, and that was consistent with prior cases where declinations were received. The weird thing about the prosecutorial offices, you don't get, like in the federal system, you get a very clear declination. So if I arrest you, I call the U.S. attorney and I say, this is what I got, they will say, no, we decline prosecution, and they give me a document saying that. It's not how it works in Massachusetts.
I think the second question was about whether was a crime scene that and protocols should have been
how long,
observed.
and then how long after was it paid back?
It was paid back. It was significant time. I think it was something that the payback had occurred while we were here, and it was brought out. But again, you're talking about $739, I think. So if
Plus the $3,000 for being off duty.
well, you paid 4 times that to an officer that you
There's
put.
separate incidences. I'm only focusing on
But what
this.
I'm saying is that administrative leave is not out of the.
It wasn't
out of the realm of
administrative leave,
possibility.
it was sick pay.
Well, then that's the officer's money. That's his sick pay. He can use that.
But then there was
anytime he's
hours
sick.
that he wasn't there for. So was this all documented?
Well, the hours are put in on leave slips, and if someone's sick, like I earned my sick time. So
No, I'm talking about the other hours that he did. So
The
there was sick-
administrative leave?
There was sick pay, and then there was time that he was on the books for, that he wasn't there.
yeah, so I looked at it. So there was 4 days of administrative leave, which is at the discretion of the chief, which I would do anytime I have an officer in a traumatic event. And then at the end of those 4 administrative leave days, he chose to use sick time because he had a little girl and a wife who was also brokenhearted. So he used sick time. In terms of the crime scene, yeah, you could call the car a crime scene, but there's no question on what happened. So I in terms of the ability to clean that car or what do you want to call it? Like, there's no question on what occurred there. You know,
Okay,
he-
yeah, good. So just to be clear, it happened in 23, but he didn't pay it back until you guys got here and it was already brought up, right?
It was paid back when it was discovered. We knew about the incident, and then being paid back was brought to our attention.
But you don't
So
know exactly when about it was paid back.
I don't.
You guys got here in November?
Yeah, it was sometime between November and today. But what I can tell you is, and this is up for you to decide. So when we look at that and you think, okay, is this something that's devious? Well, if it's devious, I'm not going to employ a company and then pay with public funds if I'm trying to hide something. I'm not going to have my police department pay a receipt and create a record of that. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thanks. We'll go now to microphone number 1.
Yep, Karen Murphy from Canton. I want to go back to the slides. You had one about when a person wants to put a complaint in, and you had the do's and then you had the don'ts. And the way one of the don'ts was worded, I found to be a bit odd. It was that you do not want the officer to calm or appease the complainant.
Yep.
And on that particular one, I understand you don't want to minimize it because you don't want the complainant not to put the complaint in. But I found it odd that you did not want to also have some type of empathy to the person as they're putting the complaint in.
I didn't say empathy.
No. I said, but the way it says calm or appease. And I'm just saying if somebody is distraught putting it in, you don't want to minimize it, but do you not want to be?
I didn't say minimize it.
No.
No, and I'm not being.
No,
confrontational,
but
there's-
I'm trying to understand what you meant by calm or appease
Yeah,
the
so
person.
I
as a
want to go
don't.
back, to that slide because there's a legal ramification to that. And it's not me saying be mean or insensitive.
Right, that's why I'm looking
Yeah,
for
no, and
the
I'll-
mediology of the terminology you're using. And
Okay.
again, you're taking a larger document into a slideshow with a PowerPoint.
Yeah, so don't try to mediate or give responses or I guess I did say calm or appease. But my point is with that is if you come and want to file a complaint, that's your right. Any attempt by me to stop you from doing that can be misconstrued. And it could easily be like, well, yeah, I had the right to file a complaint, but he talked me out of it. You should have heard how much he said, don't do it. So I say, let the complaint process, when you do it right, speak for itself. Don't be anti-empathetic. So when you come in with your complaint, I understand. I care, I'm empathetic. The best thing I can do for you is say, fill out this form. And any kind of conversation that prevents you from doing that or talks you out of doing that, regardless of my intent, can be misconstrued on the back end by anybody. And during these times when everyone's talking about transparency, the best thing any officer for the Canton PD could do is, you have a right to file a complaint. I understand, I care. Once you do this, then I can do my job and we can take care of that. So that's what I meant by that. So any kind of attempt to be like, well, it's really not something you want to complain about, or it's not that big a deal. Well, depending on who's looking at that, now you're walking that fine line of, am I hiding something? So these guys don't want to hide anything. So the best recommendation we can give is give the complaint, don't stop anybody from filling it out, and let them complete that and let that process take its course.
That's what I was trying to get at with, you don't want to minimize it, but there should be, you want that person to feel
Empathetic.
as if they've been
They
heard
care,
and as
of
if-
course.
when they're leaving. That's why that sentence, and again, you're taking a larger document, you're just slaying down to 4 words in that particular
Right.
one. So there should be some compassion along the way.
And that
not
was my
necessarily-
intent. Don't be non-compassionate, don't be robotic, don't act like you don't care, but don't do anything that's going to make that citizen feel like I don't have the right to file this complaint.
Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. We'll go now to microphone number 2.
Gilda McGonigal, Canton. I want to start out by saying thank you to Police Chief Rafferty for her service and to all of the members of the Canton Police Department during these last couple of years when they've had so much harassment. I also want to thank John Connolly for being the only member that I know of the Select Board who has openly supported the police department, and I think that deserves a lot of credit. And I want to thank Five Stones for giving us this presentation. And as you probably can tell, there are a certain number of people here who will never be happy unless you find corruption. It's very clear that that's really the only solution or the only finding that's going to satisfy them. I do have one question, and it relates to the characterization of crime scene. We've seen a lot in newspapers and the Herald. They were very quick, for an example, the Boston Herald, to jump on the fact that the crime scene, the Canton Police Department did not handle the crime scene appropriately. So I wanted to know what constitutes a crime scene. I think there was an excerpt in your report that noted that the Canton Police emergency or the 911 call was initially characterized in such a way that they did not respond to a hit and run, which is a crime, that they were responding to an unattended death, I think is what it said. And I wanted to understand if there was, let me just read this. I also submitted this in the portal, but now that I'm here, what is the specific language or assumption by the 911 caller that dictates crime scene protocol versus accident scene protocol? And also, what are the different procedures governing each? If the victim has not been declared dead, is it standard procedure to photograph him, or does that typically only occur when death is certain? If the victim is potentially revivable, don't life-saving techniques take precedence over crime scene processing, particularly if the facts initially available do not specifically indicate a crime?
Thank you.
So you're talking about in the report where it says that the Canton Police first responders did not photograph Mr. O'Keefe before he was placed in the rescue, right?
I'm not talking specifically about just what the report has captured. I'm also talking about what some of the media and newspapers have captured in terms of what the report states. I think context is an important thing, and I'm not sure that they have it.
Yeah, they're going to write it the way they want to write it. Was called in as, unresponsive man in the snow at 34 Fairview Road. Initially, Sergeant Good, he kicked it over to Fire Rescue. I listened to the call a couple times. Jen McCabe did a really good job describing the events, back and forth with the Fire Rescue. I think at one point, she described that they were turning him over because he was face down. You know, it was a, you know, must have been very traumatic for her, obviously, and still traumatic to this day. And I think the back and forth was, you know, is he breathing? And, you know, I'm not sure. And I think that she might have made some other comments. She didn't know basically if he was responsible or not. When you respond to a crime scene, whatever it is, even though you don't know what that crime scene is, we were hired to look at policy and procedure. You know, the policy and procedure is very, very tight. It tells police officers what to do when they respond. Photograph, sketch the crime scene, notifications to supervisors, all which was done. They didn't have time to make those, conduct photographs because there was a lot going on with the initial responder there, Steve Saraf. I think he tried to do the best he could with the few minutes before the fire rescue showed up. So when you're a first responder, you really don't know what you're responding to. Best practices and pursuant to policy, photographs should have been taken, but there are factors where you don't have time. If you're doing CPR and you're on top of somebody, and you're doing mouth to mouth, and you're the only police officer there, you're not gonna be able to do both.
Point was that when they responded, they did not necessarily respond to a crime. They responded to a person who needed help, who needed
Yes.
medical assistance. And therefore, taking a picture of the person probably wasn't the correct thing to do, because the first thing that they wanted to do is render aid to that person.
Okay,
Yeah, that's first and foremost, but set that crime scene aside. You should, you know, pursuant to your own policy and best standards, you should photograph all crime scenes, no matter if the person is alive or dead.
Okay,
That's
microphone number
pursuant to
2, you
policy.
are out of time, and we're going to go to microphone number 1 now.
Yes, Sean Colburn. I have a couple questions.
And what's your town, sir?
Canton.
Thank you.
The other night when you guys had met with the audit committee at Town Hall, there were some questions regarding the Sallyport video. Could you give us some insight on what transpired with the Sallyport video? That I think Brian made a comment that there are 28 cameras located in and around the Canton Police Station, and that the Sallyport video was filming. It was a motion activated camera. Could you give me some insight onto, because you made a comment that the cameras were replaced or not replaced at a certain time, and I would just like some clarity on what you were told by the IT director, Louis Jutras, on when the cameras were or were not replaced, what cameras inside the Sallyport were being recording inverted, and if in fact, I understand that you guys are not here to conduct an investigation, but when he told you that those Sallyport cameras inside were motion activated, did you ever think of stepping outside the door and stepping back inside the garage and seeing if your movement was actually captured and it was inverted?
No to that question. I'll answer your other question. When we sat down with
Specific with the dates on when IT Director Louis Jutras told you that the cameras were not to be touched by an authority, whether it was the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office, whether it was Helena
we
Rafferty.
didn't ask him those types of questions. We asked him, how many cameras are there in and around the Canton Police Department? He noted there was 28, most of which are analog. I think there's 2 IP cameras. We asked him regarding the mirrored camera. There's 1 mirrored camera inside the Sallyport number 3. There's also a couple other in the town. The Canton Police Department didn't go up there and hit mirrored 20 years ago when they installed the camera. We know that because we had a discussion about that, because there's other cameras in town that were installed by whoever installed them 20 years ago. And I'll answer your question again. No, when we met with him, we didn't walk downstairs from the conference room, walk into the Sally Port to see if the camera was working. That wasn't in our scope of work. Further, we did not look at any videos from Karen Reed's vehicle when it was there from January 29th to February 2nd. Wasn't in the scope of work. We're not there to review what was on the camera or what wasn't on the camera.
Okay.
Okay, you're actually out of time, and
I asked one question. I don't think the response was I out of time? Was my 2 minutes up on a question?
yeah, you were out of time. I'm so sorry. Well, look, if you want to ask
I
a
just-
really quick follow-up question,
No, I
go
do,
ahead.
yeah,
but-
it is, no, it is a follow-up question. The other night, when David Clow, who's a member of the audit committee, asked a question about 42 minutes of missing video, Brian had made a statement, you're both Brian's, correct? And, no? Well, you made a statement about gold being on a table and disappearing doesn't mean that the gold was there or whatever. And there was also a statement made that the cameras were not to be touched, that they were told, Louis Jutras was told that the cameras were not to be replaced by an authority,
Yeah,
whether
the
it was
mirrored camera has not been replaced. It's still in the same way it was when that vehicle was driven in on January 29th. The mirrored camera you're talking about, it's still in place. And
It is still in place to
It
this
is
day.
still in place because there's a prosecution going on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we're supposed to end at 5 o'clock. I see we've got 3 people waiting to ask a question. Are you okay with that? All right, we'll go to microphone number 3. That's you, sir.
Okay,
Microphone
fine.
number 3.
Thank you. My name is Peter Murphy. I live in Marshfield, Mass., and I was a 30-year affiliate of the Canton Police Department. The last 22 years I spent as a sergeant. I believe I've met Brian and Matt up here, and also the other gentleman who was a state trooper at the library when they gave their proposal. We can agree, gentlemen, that we're cops, right? We know this business inside and out, 30 years, 30 years, 30 years. I guess I want to ask you a simple question. If it was your family member laying in the snow on that morning and sometime after 6:06 a.m., the process of the investigation went ongoing and continued. I mean, there were no pictures taken. There was possible exigent circumstances where a protective sweep should have been done. Everybody on that department knows that Brian Albert was in a fugitive unit and a gang unit. There could have been multiple decedents or victims around the property or in the house. Nothing took place to assure that that victim on the ground was the only victim. And what I'd like to suggest is the crime scene became twofold, sir. It went from the ground into the ambulance. Had a police officer, which I had to dispatch many times on crime scenes I was on, gone in that ambulance and witnessed clothing being cut and the marks on the right arm, it would have been pretty apparent to a Cub Scout that there was a lot going on there, and perhaps maybe a taillight didn't do that. Maybe it was some sort of another physical attack. Would you have been happy if it was your family member and satisfied with that investigation? Or could that investigation concluded it was not Alexa's taillight and Karen Reed, is factually innocent?
So
I'm going to take that as more of a statement versus a question.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to answer because that's not a question. You just got on your soapbox and you made a statement. You assumed a lot of things that didn't happen. I don't know.
Okay, folks, we can't hear the answer if you're drowning out the speaker. Thank you.
Yeah, that's not a question. So I'm not going to answer it, especially when you're talking about an ongoing investigation. So
Thank you. We'll go to microphone number 2.
Thank you, Ms. Moderator. Greg Murphy, Canton. You mentioned in your report, radio communication had blind spots in the town with regards to areas that portable radios wouldn't work. Last year, the town voted to spend over $1.6 million to implement a new communication system for both the police and fire departments. As a member of the Capital Planning Committee, I can tell you we were given the expectation that this would meet both departments' communication needs, not only across town, but also to Milton Hospital. So my questions are, were you aware of this system being implemented? And if so, do you know the status of the implementation? And if it was not fully implemented, do you know if it'll address the concerns when it's fully implemented?
I believe yes, sort of, now is going to be this answer. So when we brought this issue with the radios to the attention of the police department, as well as the town administrator, as well as the IT specialist, there are issues, I guess, with the repeaters. And one of the things we had talked about was the fire department doesn't experience the same issues. Well, I think they have repeaters in their cars. And I believe the ultimate fix and or the complete implementation of the new radio system is going to be dependent upon and take effect after a school. Is that Brian? Right? The school has to come up? Yeah, so there's a new school that is approved for funding, and then the radio system goes into effect after that.
New school to be built before they implement this new communication system?
Yeah.
The school
Yeah,
won't be built for several years.
My understanding from discussions with the IT specialist, Lewis, is that they're going to be doing upgrades to all the different systems when the new school is built. We did bring that to his attention, so they're going to look to get maybe another repeater to rectify those dead zones.
I'm sorry, I'm a little unclear how the school relates to this 1.6 million. the town
You know, I'm
You'd have
sorry,
to-
that actually is beyond the scope
Yeah.
of the report for these guys also. It really is implementation that's for another meeting with another set of folks to answer that question. And looks like microphone 1, you get the last word.
Much. Is it still on? Still on. I'll just wait for them.
I'm sorry? Okay.
You can go.
Okay,
You can go.
yes.
Let him go.
Yes,
Go
okay.
ahead.
Microphone number 2, we'll defer to you. Go ahead.
My name is Kevin Clapp. I live in Middleborough. I've moved around quite a bit because I haven't been able to find a place in Massachusetts that's not rigged yet. I don't believe there is a town or a state. I worked in law enforcement. I'm retired from the MBTA. I worked on campus police departments. I'm not here to take sides for either person. I want to see justice. I was where Karen Reed was in 2016.
Okay, that,
Okay.
you know, that really doesn't have to do with this police audit report.
Okay, well.
You got a question about the police audit report?
Well, if we don't have anything to hide, ma'am, you'd let me speak, and then I'll get to my point.
Well, I
Because
don't
I
have
think
anything to-
everyone in here is going to want to hear what I got in the mail. Okay?
Does it relate to the police audit report, what you got in the mail?
Well, indirectly, but I'm going to ask one question first that relates to the solo cups I'm going to put out to rest. They talk about a leaf blower. Can somebody explain that to me? Because I've never seen a leaf blower on a police cruiser before. Where did it come from? Do they carry leaf blowers? Was it electric or gas? And my God, it would make an awful lot of noise to use a leaf blower in the middle of the night. So could you please exploit yourself a little bit on that about the leaf blower? Because that, to me, is bizarre.
So I think we covered the leaf blower in the main presentation. Is there
Can you
anything
not
to add?
interrupt him and let him speak? I feel like Trump now.
That's enough.
He would like
Is
to
there anything to add to the explanation you gave? Okay, all right, thank you very much. We'll go to microphone number 1.
Rita Lombardi, Canton. You know, the performance of people impacts credibility. And we mentioned earlier that there was someone who was put on paid leave over the summer for leaving his badge and gun and being out drunk, okay? And then eventually they did the internal affairs investigation and he was suspended either 3 to 5 days. So when it's something like that, that seems so egregious to people, and then it appears he gets the summer off, that damages credibility. Did you get any insight as to why it took 3 months, why that person was given a 3-month leave over a beautiful summer?
Well, one of the things I'd said was he shouldn't have, but it was outside sourced because the perception that the Canton Police Department can't police themselves, the decision was made to take this investigation to an outside authority to conduct an investigation that should have taken a week. So that's why he's on administrative leave, because pending those findings, the most prudent thing to do is not to have him in the department should these findings come back more significant than what they're expected to. They did not. So then he came back to work after that. But aside from the administrative leave, that officer's put at a hardship financially. The department's put at a hardship financially, and the town. So that is why we recommend strongly not to outsource internal affairs investigations. And then Rita, wow, you're gonna be shocked when I say this. In my time overseeing the internal affairs process for DEA, probably suspended 130 guys for having a drink on the way home. It's not that egregious, man. It happens.
Right.
And what you hope is the officers say, yeah, I stopped. I had a sandwich. I had a beer. And you say, well, you can't do that in your police vehicle. And you wear the suspension and everybody moves on. So in terms of like that act being a very egregious, alarming thing, it's not. It shouldn't happen, so we have standards, but it's not something that from that internal affairs process where you say, hey, this guy stopped and had a beer on the way home. It's like 90% of America does that. But the problem is police officer can't do that in a police car. So
Okay, so we're going to
just
make
finish?
that a wrap. He's answered your question. We're going to make that a wrap, and I'm going to let you know that there will be a press conference for those of you who are in the press in the cafeteria immediately after this meeting. And I want to thank Five Stones and all of the people here for coming out today, listening and asking questions. Thank you all very much.